Okay, it's 5:31, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Monroe County Plan Commission to order. Will you please call the roll?
Sure. I will go ahead and call the roll. I'll note, I believe Larry is also on the call, but I'll get us started. Tron Enright Randolph.
Here.
Bernie Garitas.
Here.
Jeff McKim.
Here.
Dee Owens.
Yes, I'm present.
Jerry Pittsburgh. Jim Stainbrook. Julie Thomas.
Here.
Amy Thompson.
Oh, she's here.
Art
One moment.
Clemens.
Here.
And then Susan Sandberg or Beth Kate from the city. Sorry, tech services, did you say something?
Yeah, Amy Thompson.
Oh, okay.
You just added me. I'm here. Was here.
Okay, so then we're missing Jim and Jerry at the moment, so, okay.
Okay, and just a note before we begin. We expect a rather large crowd because of the full page ad that was taken out in the newspaper yesterday, asking the public to attend. So we're expecting a large crowd tonight. And as such, I wondered if anyone would think about moving item 1 to the last part of the agenda. We have 2 items on the agenda. And if we wanted to invert the order, so that we could at least accomplish 1 item of the agenda. But moving on, before we'll consider that the moment that we make the approval of the agenda, but I wanted to mention that first off. So Mr. Wilson, would you please introduce the evidence?
Yes, I request the following items be introduced into evidence for tonight's meeting. Monroe County Comprehensive Plan is adopted and amended. Monroe County Zoning Ordinance is adopted and amended. Monroe County Subdivision Ordinance is adopted and amended. The rules of procedure of the Monroe County Plan Commission and the cases advertised and docketed for hearing on tonight's agenda.
Move we accept the evidence as read.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Wilson, will you please call?
I sure will. The vote is on approval of the evidence. Vote in favor, vote to approve the evidence as presented. Tron Enright Randolph.
Yes.
Dee Owens.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
Jim Stainbrook. Bernie Garitas.
Yes.
Barbara Clemens.
Okay.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
And Margaret, I didn't hear your response, but
Said yes.
okay, this sounds a little muffled tonight.
Okay,
But the evidence has been approved by a 7-0 vote.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the agenda, the approval of the agenda. Is there any consideration given to inverting the items on the agenda?
So, Madam Chair, just my thought is, while I appreciate the sentiment of trying to accommodate both parties, that second agenda item might be somewhat complicated as well. And I don't know. I guess my inclination. I don't have a strong opinion. My inclination is to keep with the agenda as published. But I understand what you're doing.
If there is a motion to approve the agenda, then?
So moved.
Is there a second? Please call the roll.
The vote is on approval of the agenda as published and presented. A vote in favor is vote to approve the agenda. Dee Owens.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
Garitas.
Yes.
Barbara Clemens.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph.
Yes.
The agenda is approved as published by a 7-0 vote.
Okay, thank you. Well, there are no minutes to approve. There's no administrative business and there's no unfinished business. So we can get ourselves ready to go for new business. So the first item on the agenda is REZ-21-1, the trails at Robertson Farm, a rezone from RE1 to HR. And this is the preliminary hearing, and a request has been made to waive the final hearing. So is Rebecca present, or will you be?
I'm going to present this one.
Thank you, Jackie. If you would please present the petition.
Sure. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Try and speak close to the mic. Okay, so this is a request for a rezone from a state residential 1 to high density residential. The purpose of this rezone stated by the petitioner is to create attainable middle housing in Monroe County. And so we wanted to remind you of the meeting schedule that this has gone through to date. So it's gone to the Plan Review Committee on May 13th. It went to the Plan Commission Administrative Meeting on June 1st. And then we are here tonight at the first public hearing for this petition consideration of high density rezone. The petitioner has requested a waiver of final hearing, but if that waiver is not granted, they will be coming back to the July 20th Plan Commission meeting. And then from there, they will go to the county commissioners for a final vote. So just want to remind people of that timeline. So their proposal includes a mix of housing types, including single family homes and paired patio homes or attached single family homes. Their proposal is to have the development built out over 7 years in 3 phases, capped at 160 lots. And their proposal includes 3.6 lots per acre, and the site contains a total of 44.07 acres. So high density residential typically allows for up to 7.3 lots per acre, but the petitioner in this case is requesting that a commitment be included in this rezone consideration that would cap the total number of lots that would be permitted to 160. The proposal includes 2 forms of ingress egress, but both leaving South Victor Pike for vehicles. There is a connection to both Clear Creek Trail and the Bloomington Rail Trail, which are both maintained by the city of Bloomington. One of the previous meetings, Plan Commission members had recommended that staff put together a visual that shows the amount of buildable area on any given lot. So what we did on the screen here is we subtracted out all of the roadways. We subtracted out the large transmission utility easements, any karst features, drainage features, etc. And what we were left with was 27.07 acres. So if you're considering all of the buildable area on this site and under the medium density residential zoning, if that were to be considered, which is a staff recommendation, they would get 128 lots. If high density residential is considered, which is the petitioner's request, they would get 193 lots naturally. So by right, without any commitments. So the petitioner again is putting together a commitment to cap that at 160 lots. But what we wanted to do with this visual was show you kind of where they are at in terms of the amount of buildable area, and simply put all of the acreage they could utilize towards putting into a lot for consideration of development in the future. So this is something that staff put together. So the current zoning of the property, again, is a state residential 1, which allows for 1 acre minimum lot size. And then you'll see to the north, you have quite a few planned unit developments, which average out to be similar to the high density residential in some areas, and then also similar to on this screen, RS 3.5, which means 3.5 dwelling units per acre. So they also have medium density residential, which is very much the same as this RS 3.5. And then you have a state residential over here, which is 1 acre, suburban residential, which can be less than an acre, agricultural rural reserve, 2.5 acres, low density residential, which is 0.34 acres. So they have a lot of different zoning different zoning designations in this area. And what they're asking for tonight is a high density residential recommendation. On the right, you'll see the comprehensive plan. So this is located in the urbanizing area, and it's located in the mixed residential district. And you'll note that similar properties over to the east are also zoned this mixed residential zoning designation. So just to go over a few drainage and highway recommendations. So the Drainage Board did preliminarily review and approve a proposed plan unit development outline plan for an impervious cover that was very much the same as what you're looking at tonight. So at this stage, because it's considered a rezone, the Drainage Board doesn't have hard numbers to look at. They're looking at conceptually impervious cover and detention capacities and things like that. So they have reviewed that, and full drainage review would be required if this rezone does proceed to the next step and before any kind of subdivision or development could occur. But at this point, they've given their preliminary approval of what has been proposed thus far. And then the highway department has also noted that roadway approach permits or driveway permits have not been applied for at this point, because again, it's conceptual, noting the 2 locations off of Victor Pike that they hope to access. They have shown a continuous left turn lane and a deceleration acceleration lane that has been reviewed by the highway department. And they have provided cross sections as well to the highway engineer, and they are working together on that as well. The width of Victor Pike at this location is 18 feet, average daily trips 1,248. Speed limit is 30 miles per hour, and 1 crash has been reported in the last 3 years, and it is noted as a local road. So additionally, we have requested capacity and will serve letters. Notably, this property is the southern boundary of the city's proposed annexation plan. So we wanted to verify and confirm utilities could serve this property. So Center Point, which previously was Vectren, would be the natural gas. City of Bloomington Utilities has stated that they would serve as the sewer provider. Southern Monroe Water Authority has stated that they would be the water capacity. And then Duke has provided electric capacity. So I will point out in your packet, you'll see a letter from the Southern Monroe Water, and staff has received a few questions. So we wanted to make sure that we were ahead of it in terms of getting some correct factual information. So the letter from the Southern Monroe Water does state about the hydrants and fire protection. So I wanted to note the Monroe Fire Protection District would cover this property since it's in the county jurisdiction. And then the engineer for this case has determined that there would be capacity for full fire hydrants at the site, but that they would have to be private lines, and an entity such as a homeowners association would have to maintain them, since the Southern Monroe Water is stating that they would not be providing full fire hydrants, but that we could get there with some level of private infrastructure. Rebecca also put together a table to better show the comparison against what they're asking and what exists out in the county surrounding this area. So I'll point your attention to this high density residential, which is 7.3 dwelling units per acre, minimum lot size of 0.14 acres, minimum lot width of 50 feet, front yard, side yard, rear yard setback, pretty consistent, 25 feet, 5 feet side, 10 feet rear, open space 40%, maximum height 35 feet. And then over here you have what it is currently zoned residential or estate residential 1. So 1 dwelling unit per acre. Minimum lot area is 1 acre. Minimum lot width as 100 feet. And then front setback is 25 feet. Side yard is minimum of 20 feet plus 4 feet for each additional housing story. Rear yard is 50 feet. The minimum open space area is 80% and the maximum height here is 45 feet. So just want to point that out for you, and we can return to this at any point. So proposed uses, since this is a rezone, we're considering the different uses that would be permitted. And similarly to residential, estate residential 1, what they're looking to do is residential uses, single family, but notably under this rezone, they would be able to do attached single family, which is not a permitted allowance under RE1. So only under a zoning jurisdiction such as medium density or high density residential would they be able to do the attached single family homes. So surrounding zoning, just to go a little bit deeper into this consideration for high density residential, there is high density residential in the county, but it's primarily located in Steinsville. There's also a bit of high density residential, which is not showing up on the map, but it is located over in this area here. So primarily Steinsville, and then we have medium density residential located around Ellettsville, South College Avenue. So this property here is medium density residential, Harrodsburg. So we have definitely more medium density residential in the county, considering 0.26% of the county is medium density residential, whereas 0.02% of the county is zoned high density residential. So the staff recommendation in the packet is to rezone the property, consider rezoning the property medium density residential for this site. And we had a basis for this as several considerations that I'd like to go through here. So the property offers one-way in and out on Victor Pike due to floodplain constraints along that road. Medium density zoning is a transition zone between the northern higher density neighborhoods and the southern lower density zoning districts. The proximity to the trails is an asset to this property. I also want to note that there was something in the packet that noted that there was not sidewalks to get to services such as Kroger. If you were to take the Beeline Trail all the way to the north and follow that to Roar Road, all the way to Kroger, I did follow along on an aerial map. There is sidewalks all the way to services, but it is over a mile. The comprehensive plan supports medium density residential zoning. Other proximate parcels are zoned similarly under the comprehensive plan and are currently zoned medium density residential. I named the Southern Meadows property as a prime example. Services are nearby, but not as proximate as desired for the highest density zoning district. So nearest bus stop and grocery store near Kroger is about a mile away. The petitioner has requested the high density residential zoning with a cap of 160 units. It is staff's preference to have a straight rezone with all zoning standards applied as proposed under the ordinance, and sometimes keeping track of those commitments can lead to error in the future. So I'll go ahead and take any questions at this point from the Plan Commission.
So are there members of the Plan Commission who have questions for Jackie or for any other member of the staff?
I can't get my hand raised to work, Margaret. I've got, I think, a quick question.
Yes.
For the medium density residential, Jackie, what would be that calculated density or number, not the density, but the number of home sites for the medium density that staff is suggesting?
So Bernie, based on the map that I showed in the beginning, it was coming out to be about 128, 129 lots but that was only in consideration of the lots being 100% buildable. So lots are permitted to contain, let's say, easements or karst features, but this is probably the minimum amount if there's a complete buildable area on all the lots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Enright Randolph?
Sorry, I kind of hit the unmute. So I guess my question is the recommendation. This is one of the most obscured recommendation I've seen to date, where it doesn't say you're recommending approval or denial. Based on finding of facts in accordance with the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan, staff recommends medium density residential MR zoning as an appropriate zoning destination for this site. The recommendation is based on the following. I'll say straight up, I don't like that. Usually we get a positive or a negative recommendation. It's like you're giving us reasons versus a recommendation. Appropriate, I mean, appropriate, somewhat explanatory. It does say, hey, it fits, but again, I'm not in favor of this type of position that the planning staff took, and I would like some explanation.
Sure. So if we were to be responding to just the request for high density rezone, we would be recommending denial, because we don't see that as a fitting zoning designation for this area. We did also want to add in that what we would consider the property to be appropriately zoned under the comprehensive plan for clarity. And I will point out that if the petitioner does agree to remove the high density residential request and replace that with a medium density request, they would be able to stay their place in line under per legal and go next month for a final hearing in consideration of the property rezone to medium density residential, as opposed to starting all over and refiling for a medium density residential zoning district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stainbrook and then Ms. Owens.
You're on mute, Jim.
So sorry, my wife does that to me all the time. I guess I'm not used to getting unmuted, but I appreciate that. Following up with Tron's question, I thought I had followed the presentation and really had missed that. So again, not meaning to be too wordy, I appreciate Tron's discussion. It almost seems as though staff is doing some of the planning for the petitioner. That is, the petition was up for staff recommendation. And I believe we've gone through this with Tron's help then, and Jackie, with your very clear explanation. But it does seem, I'm just expressing some degree of concurrence with Tron's concern that rather just acting on the petition, that staff really is involved in. And I've been concerned with that before, that when something doesn't fit, I think the philosophical approach that Mr. Wilson so kindly expresses, you know, in terms of helping people to comply. But I really feel that it's the petitioner's place to comply, and then for the staff and certainly for the plan commission to say yay or nay. But perhaps we would have gotten to this point anyway. And so, Tron, I'm not trying to speak for you, but perhaps staff has been considerate and professional in moving us along to this possibility, not only for the sake of the petitioner, but for our assistance as well. A few more words than necessary. I do have a question. In what way, as nearly as we can be succinct, Jackie, and you do that very well, I think, does this differ from Southern Metals, where I really had no difficulty in making a decision for my own expression of opinion? I'm very concerned about Clear Creek, and it seems to me if they're encompassed by dense or medium residential, whatever, that Clear Creek loses a strong chance of losing its identity as a community. Now, unlike some of my good friends and colleagues on the Plan Commission or any place else, I was strongly in favor of the Cassidy proposal, thinking that it would give identity to Clear Creek, which has had a historical place in our communities here, from the Monon in 1870 and going up from Harrodsburg to Smithville and Clear Creek, and until recently, that is in the last 20 years, I suppose, the depot was still there in Clear Creek. So I would have kind of favored, maybe something that like a Broad Ripple, which is certainly an integral part of Indianapolis and Marion County, but nevertheless does maintain its own identity. So that's some of my concern in the past, and I anticipate that will be a concern of mine in this case, that this just serves to nullify some of the Clear Creek. I'm sorry. So Jackie, to go back though, the question really was, how does this differ from the Southern Metals petition?
So are you talking about the Southern Meadows petition for the planned unit development, or the Southern Meadows petition that we heard 2 years ago for medium density rezone?
Oh, no, Mr. Weiniger's most recent. And really part of what's troubling me here is that since I spoke with questions, reservations against the Weiniger proposal, I do think they put up a dandy product. We lived in one for several years. That's an aside at best, and I shouldn't get into that. But again, if I were against that as much as I sincerely was, in spite of the reputation and the quality of the builder and all of those good things, yes, it was the last one, Jackie. I'm sorry.
Okay, so between the what they called the SOMO project, where it was a rezone to plan unit development, they wanted to have a lot size of 0.05 acres, whereas this petitioner is requesting a rezone to high density residential, which would include a lot size of 0.14 acres. So almost 3 times the size of the lots that were for SOMO. That is the difference here. Other differences, this is a county zone high density residential, whereas SOMO was asking for their own zoning designation under a PUD. So there were some deviations from the zoning ordinance, but this one, other than the cap at 160 units, would not deviate from the zoning or subdivision ordinance.
Well, thank you and others for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Ms. Owens, Mr. McKim, and then Commissioner Thomas. Ms. Owens.
Thank you. I, for one, appreciated the recommendations from staff because an up or down vote on this doesn't necessarily feel right to me. The high density, looking at the comprehensive plan and looking through the ideas of that area seems like too much. And if I were presented with a high density only, I would not probably be compelled to vote for it. Medium density seems to fit much better, and not being a long-term member of this body, I, for one, appreciate being able to look at something different and try to understand how that might better fit. So it's just my opinion, but thank you.
Ms. Owens. Mr. McKim?
Yes, thank you. And I guess I actually would also like to echo Ms. Owens' comments. And just more generally, I appreciate staff's guidance. I think it is an essential job of staff to guide us as to how better to implement the comprehensive plan and the plans that this community has developed. And I think if they have recommendations that go beyond simply a yes or no to one specific proposal, as to one specific petition, as to how to better implement these community visions, I really appreciate it. So I think this helps us think of this. I think their recommendations help us think of this petition in context.
Thank you, Mr. McKim. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if Ms. Ridge could talk about that road and Victor Pike and plans to expand those roadways. So 12 trips a day, 125 lots, that's 1,500 additional vehicles in that area per day. But I wonder if you could talk about those.
We don't have anything that's in the works of widening those roads. That road is in very decent condition. It's a rather wider road. We do have plans for a bridge project, but does not affect anything in this area. As traffic intensifies in an area, we always look at the adjoining intersections and things of that nature to see if something else is warranted. I believe that's already a three-way stop at that road and Victor Pike, which is a good way to control the traffic at this point. And we would just monitor it as we go, as traffic increases in a certain area with these developments. But as of right now, we don't have any plans for widening Victor Pike or that road, just basically general maintenance.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Enright Randolph and then myself.
Yes, I definitely like guidance from the staff. My concern ultimately is that we've looked at some petitions just recently and we haven't had a recommendation such like this. So moving forward, I like to see this type of guidance applied consistently. I'm a big component of fairness, and I feel like some of the petitions we've seen in the past didn't really have these like alternative recommendations where, you know, planning staff could get behind it. So even the Plan Commission moved some forward with a negative recommendation from staff. So I'm not saying I don't like the guidance and these, you know, alternative options, but I think we need to apply it across the board if that's the direction we're going to start moving.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. And then I just have a comment about both the physical and the social infrastructure that seems to be inadequate for this area. Number one, the infrastructure for hydrants and the roadways would be, and drainage would be made, and the park would be maintained by the homeowners association. And I think that that's a big burden for people who are supposedly in this target audience of buying a home at $200,000 or $250,000 price point, or starter home as they've described it. That being said, we all recognize there are no guarantees on the price point that these homes would be selling for. And if it takes 7 years to build these homes, that's especially true. Even though the goal is stated, it's a non-binding goal. And with big ticket items like fire hydrants and the roadways being maintained and drainage and parks being maintained by the homeowners association, that creates, to me, a risk for the homeowners. They could have their property attached, they could have a lien placed on their property, and I think that it's part of our duty to consider what risk we're placing the homeowners in, or the potential buyers in. And then secondly, a recent article in the newspaper written by the police department said that they are having a difficult time even providing security services in the city, and having this added density in the county, I think would put a similar burden on our sheriff's department. And it may be too much. I just think that neither the city's police department nor the county sheriff's department could supply the security and the services and the needed social infrastructure that we would need for density of this nature. That being said, I have concerns about the density, and whether it's high density or medium density, I think it's too much. So I would like to then move on to recognize Mr. Schilling and then Mr. McKim.
Thank you very much. I was just going to address what Jackie suggested. The Plan Commission, when it considers a petition, can only make a recommendation favorable, against, or a no recommendation. It cannot alter the petition. Likewise, the commissioners can only make an approval, a denial, or can take no action on the matter, and it cannot change the petition before it. However, case law suggests that the petitioner has the opportunity to amend or withdraw a petition. So in order to address this as a medium residential, it would require, in my opinion, the petitioner's consent. Otherwise, you would just treat it as a high density residential petition that was presented.
Mr. Schilling, would that, if we approve it with another format and the builder does not build, would that approval transfer to and be binding to a new potential builder?
Well, what you would be approved, the Planning Commission is going to make a recommendation to the county commissioners because this is a legislative action, and the commissioners are the only ones that, of course, can take action on that. So once they rezone it, that's the zone on the property, and the standards of the zoning ordinance that apply to that zone would apply to any subsequent owner.
But if by contrast, we approve this high density PUD with their commitment to build fewer homes on the property, would that approval and that commitment be transferable to a new owner of the property and a new developer?
Yeah, and that commitment, if it's recorded prior to commissioner's action, which it's supposed to be, if they make a commitment, they record that after the Plan Commission makes its recommendation, for example, they would have to record that commitment, and the commitment would say this is subject to county commissioner's approval, and then it would go before the commissioners for consideration. So yes, it would be, if it's recorded and the commissioners approved it, it would be binding on any subsequent owner.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Mr. McKim and then Mr. Stainbrook.
Thanks. I just actually wanted to follow up a little bit quickly on this, the questions for Mr. Schilling. And I just want to make sure I understand kind of what the various paths forward are. We could certainly recommend approval of a high density petition as written. We could recommend denial of the high density residential petition as written. If we wanted to move forward with MR, then my understanding is the only way that would work is if the petitioners themselves were in agreement and withdrew the current petition and modified it or agreed to move forward with an MR petition. Is that, which we could then either vote for recommendation or denial. Is that correct?
That is my belief, that the petitioner has the right to amend their petition.
Okay, thanks. And then one other, I just wanted to also react to the comment about policing and in the area. And while I agree that there have definitely been newspaper articles about the city's challenges in recruiting and retaining police, I think if we're, I certainly can't speak on behalf of the sheriff, but I don't think anybody else can either. If that's a concern, we ought to ask the sheriff. But I will say, as a member of the fiscal body, we have not had the sheriff express concern that he cannot provide the necessary amount of police protection to the county. And if he couldn't, then I believe he would come to the county council to ask for additional resources. And we haven't seen any kind of request like that or any kind of a concern. So I don't think that should be part of the consideration unless we actually have established that that's a real concern.
Thank you. Mr. Stainbrook?
Well, now I'm listening to Tron, Mr. Schilling, and Mr. McKim. And as I understand the outcome of that, my interest, I don't want to say concern, but my interest in how the staff handles this prior to the Plan Commission considering it, it seems to me again that prematurely, and this isn't a nasty kind of thing, it just seems to me in all honesty that prior to the petitioner having made any requests of the staff to help them, of course I don't know about that, and this is somewhat redundant, but it seems to me that the staff in a good-natured way and well-intentioned way has done work and spent time on behalf of the petitioner. Then I still, after Mr. Schilling's succinct and clear explanation, nevertheless, I'm always able to confuse myself. And that is, then could the petitioner make such a request, say this evening, or would this be informative for them and they could go back and decide in a more contemplative way whether they wanted to go with the medium? So I believe I'm asking that of Mr. Schilling. Well, or Jackie, you, whichever way.
Well, I guess that might be up to the petitioner. If they have a preference on that, they can always withdraw and refile as an MR. If they want to amend, there is the potential for the second hearing anyway, which would give anybody in the audience an opportunity to attend another hearing and talk about this as an MR petition. And the MR designation is I think a less, well, obviously it's a less dense zoning than what they're requesting. So the impacts on the area would presumably be somewhat less, and they would still have a chance to talk about that. So I guess that would be up to the petitioner to decide if they wanted to amend or refile.
Thank you. And then Jackie, following up, I again listened to Jeff and David and Ron, but I believe Jeff mentioned the hesitancy to anticipate what the security might be as determined by Sheriff Swain. And I wouldn't try to speak for him either, because every time I speak to Brad or every time I turn around, he's slapping me down. But I do know in an anecdotal manner that we've had loud parties going until 1:30 this spring. And upon notifying, and we've tried to be, not because the Sheriff's Department has other more important things to do. But, well, not necessarily to us when you can't sleep. But when we've then reported to the department, it sometimes, well, the last incidents, it was at a 10 or 11 o'clock hour, and they weren't here until 1:30. So I don't know, that's anecdotal again. I seem to like that word this evening, but it seems to me that if the city can't do it, but Jeff, I defer to you again. This would be something that would have to be referred to Sheriff Brad Swain. I believe I'm taking more than my share, but thank you. Thank everyone.
The reason I raised that as an item is because it is in the annexation area and it's used as part of the justification for annexation to provide police coverage that well, we don't. And some people who have actually complained that the county resources cannot fulfill the policing needs of the Highlands subdivision. So, and you just confirmed that yourself. So I do think it's something that we need to factor into our considerations and deliberations. So, but we should get a note from Sheriff Swain and ask him how the increased density in the county impacts his ability to provide services, and what is his response time now, and how would an additional number of people and homes impact his response time. So are there any other questions or comments from any members of the Plan Commission? If none, it's time to turn to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative to hear their presentation on their proposal.
I'm going to start with, let's see. Tech Services, is there a way to present someone as a panelist and then move them back to an attendee, or should I just press allow to talk?
My suggestion is allow to talk.
Okay, can I do that for multiple people at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Kevin, you should be permitted to talk. Donnie, I have to promote you as a panelist because you have an older version of Zoom. So hold on just a second. And then Daniel and Michael Carmen. So
hey, Kevin, Daniel with Monroe and Associates. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
All right, this is Daniel. I will give a brief introduction here and then we'll get into the presentation. With me tonight is Kevin Schmidt and Donnie Atkins, and along with Mike Carmen and Jason Crothy, who has been doing some of the environmental impact study on this. So if you have any questions about that, he'll be here tonight. And then also, well, that's our team for that will be representing the petitioner. But real quick, we always at Bynum Fannie are trying to have projects that we would bring before you as a plan commission that we believe would fit the county's needs. And so we, in this case, bringing affordable housing in this area felt like a good placement of it. And so we originally came before the planning staff with an idea for a PUD designation on this property. And that the reason for that, it gave some unique aspects and characteristics and qualities of this property that you wouldn't be able to get with just straight zoning. So that was the reason for that. But these guys I've been working with, I do have to say that out of a lot of the different clients that we have, these guys have, we felt like brought forth a quality product from the beginning in that they wanted to do just more than producing lots and homes. They wanted to do parks and options for different things for enhancing this area. So we do feel like we've taken some time and done a lot of study with stormwater, traffic, different impact studies with environmental features. And we do feel like in the end, switching over to, it's kind of, we see it as a MR and HR kind of in between that. That's why we're capping ourselves at 160 here. But we have worked with the staff to try to come up with something that would fit for everybody in this area, not too dense. But with that, I'll let Kevin do a bit of more of a presentation.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Jackie. So I'm gonna let Donnie get started. So Donnie, are you able to talk now?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Donnie Atkins, and thanks for taking the time to come along for this ride. This isn't the first time you've met us. You know, we submitted for the PUD before, and just want to tell you how much we appreciate the planning team's help to get us to this point, and the commissioners as well, and the rest of the committee to help us mature this process, and help us address all of the different issues, concerns, and opportunities that we have to really help the community out and solve some big problems. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Jackie. Just to introduce ourselves again, I'm Donnie Adkins. I graduated, as you can see here, from IU in 2001. I got commissioned at the IMU as a second lieutenant and then joined the Air Force. It's been a great 20 years since then. And it's so exciting that I'm back here now, here in Bloomington during this meeting. You can see, after the Air Force, I went and spent some good time all over the world in some nasty spots and some better spots. You can decide which ones those are between Louisiana, Canada, Iraq, and Nigeria. And really looking forward to this next opportunity. My partner, Kevin there, he's got a great educational pedigree as well, just not from IU, unfortunately. But his mother and father-in-law actually met here in Bloomington and graduated back in 1968. And I'm very lucky to partner with him. He's got a great global experience as well on other major energy projects as well. And so together, we're really looking forward to this opportunity. If you could go to the next slide, please. So just want to spend a second here to talk about our inspiration. And, you know, Kevin and I, we could look at opportunities all over the world, but why are we here in Bloomington? And the answer is because it's our favorite place in the whole world. And you can talk to anybody who knows me, and they will tell you that Bloomington is always a place I want to return to after living all over the world. And you can see our children there. Those are my kids. You can see my daughter at 6 months old rooting for the Hoosiers. And then this was, and then, you know, we're here right now in Bloomington, and we were over at Cascades Park earlier this week. And that's a picture from about a year ago. But, you know, my kids love it here as well. And Kevin's kids love being outside. And, you know, the reason why this slide is here is so everyone really understands our inspiration is building a neighborhood that we would want our kids and our families to flourish in. And that's been our goal, just as Danny mentioned. It's not just to pump out more houses. It's to build a really special spot in Bloomington that people talk highly of for years to come. You know, places like Winslow Farms right next to the YMCA and the City Woods. And then, you know, and there's so many other great examples around town of good, solid developments that have really left a positive, lasting impact on the community and tied into the environment as they were doing so. And so that's our goal. That's our inspiration. Now, jumping into the business case, if you will, we really want to try to help people understand why we're asking for what we're asking for. As Jackie mentioned, right now, the lot is currently zoned RE1. And so we could go crank out 40, 44, 1 acre estate homes, no problem. But we're seeking additional density. We're seeking a lot more homes. And the reason why we're doing that is to help build more homes, to get more density, to reduce the cost of the houses. And I'll touch on that why on the next slide. But here's just a bit of the business case. So if we just look at the direct costs, and this doesn't include marketing, purchasing, or building the parks, or, you know, managing somebody to actually do the construction for us. The cheapest we could get a lot with 40 home sites on this 44 acres is about $100,000. And once you build a house there and you comp it with everything else, you're looking at something around $600,000 or $700,000 at least. And so we need this density to get the prices of the houses lower. And you can see right there what that compares to. So, you know, it's an order of magnitude of, you know, 3 to 4 times-ish on what we can do to make the houses more attainable for families with more density. And so, you know, and Kevin's going to touch on it as well. You know, we're asking for HR, but we're not asking for HR to go build 320 homes or the max that we can do. We're asking for HR for the diversity. And Kevin's going to tell you why, but that is a sweet spot. We feel with that number, somewhere around there, 160, that will allow us to distribute these costs to make these homes more attainable for families. If you could go to the next slide, please, Jackie. So now let's just talk about, you know, with that business case tying into the needs and the demands of the market and the economy right now. Everybody around the world, especially the United States, will tell you housing is short, and that includes Monroe County. These stats we have right here are the latest stats from May from the Indiana Association of Realtors. Jackie, can you blow up that table a bit for us, please? All right, so we drew that red line at $500,000, but let's just, Jackie, if you could just kind of scroll over to like the 275 to 299, just kind of that area, that row, And then if you scroll over to the current number of listings available. So if we just scroll over there and zoom or focus in on that 6 or 7 and that, you know, the second to last column from the right, that is how many current listings there were in May of homes in those prices. And those are all residential homes. That includes condos, townhomes, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, tear downers. So just think about if you're a family and you're looking for a 3 or 4 bedroom house in the $275, $299 price range. There are 6 properties total, and probably half of those are apartments or condos. So out of that, you might have 1 or 2, 3 or 4 bedroom house to look for. I mean, think about that. If you're trying to find a house for your family, there's 1, maybe 2 available, and something less than $350,000. If you want to zoom back out, Jackie, I'm sorry, one more point before you zoom out. I'm sorry, Jackie. So we drew that line there at 600,000. You see there, after 600,000, the market gets much more stable. You know, every realtor you talk to will tell you 6 months supply is about what you need. And so if you look in that final column, that's how many months supply. So down there at 5.5, that's how many months supply there are of homes greater than 600,000. So the point of this slide, I'm sorry, Jackie, now you can back out. The point of this slide is, and again, if you looked at the data for the last 12 months, it looked very similar to this. In fact, it's getting worse over time. But the point of this slide is the problem we have, the crisis we have for families to find housing is in that $200,000 to $400,000 range. When we get above that, when we get above 600 or 700,000, there's plenty of homes. And Bloomington and Monroe County doesn't need that. So that's not the problem we want to solve, despite the fact we could go do that with the RE1 zone right now. It doesn't do us any good to build more Pedigo Bays or Sterling Woods or other McMansions around town. We want to build homes that families can afford and move into and move up into. Maybe it might not be their first home, but it'd be their second home. And so we're really shooting, and we need the density to target the high 200s to that up to 400 price range. That's our goal. I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Donnie. Jackie, can you hear me? Great. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, Donnie did a great job, I think, of setting up the fact that this is not a problem only we're trying to solve. It's a problem that the entire county and city and area, and in fact, really the entire United States is dealing with. I think what we're going to try and do over the next few minutes, and what Donnie's trying to do, is just, there's been a lot of information that's been said or heard or thought. What we'd really like to do is just make sure that the facts are presented, and that there's no misconceptions of what we're providing, of what we're offering, and what is reality in the field. So we put these slides in the package. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look through them. We are more than happy to take any questions, but we've put a lot of time and effort into not only the studies behind these slides, but also trying to make sure that these slides are clear, because we've heard a number of things that seem to be talked about that are not actual reality. And we want to make sure that everyone has the facts, so that the right decisions can be made. Obviously, people have different opinions, but we just want to make sure that the facts are clear. So if we talk about this, you know, one of the biggest things that we've been looking at is the comprehensive plan. And I mean, the comprehensive plan is something that was done in March of 2012. And really was, you know, if you read about it, it talks about the residents and key stakeholders developed a vision for the future property use in Monroe County through the adoption of the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan. This vision recognizes the independence of social equity, economic vitality, and environmental integrity to provide a sustainable future for Monroe County. So the idea that we would not follow the comprehensive plan or take any exceptions to the comprehensive plan is you know, flying in the face of the work that was done with many, many people over that time period. So we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure with the planning staff that we are 100% aligned with the comprehensive plan. So if you can see on this slide, I'll just go through some of the specifics, but you know, as Jackie mentioned, mixed use residential is what this is zoned for. So I'll read, these are quotes. Mixed residential neighborhoods accommodate a wide array of both single family homes and attached housing types integrated into a cohesive neighborhood. That is literally 100% exactly what we are trying to do. These neighborhoods are intended to serve growing market demand for new housing choices among a full spectrum of demographic groups. And as Donnie mentioned, the HR versus MR, it's been a big debate today. I think that there's a bit of misconception there. You know, our intent is to build a MR or less dense area with the flexibility of housing type of HR zoning. So I want to make sure that that's 100% clear. We are proposing a 3.6 lots per acre. MR allows 4.8 lots per acre. HR allows 7+ lots per acre. We are not proposing anything higher. We're actually proposing less than MR allows. So all we're asking for is to meet what we believe is a quote from the comprehensive plan saying these neighborhoods are intended to serve a growing market demand of new housing choices on a full spectrum of demographic groups. As Donnie mentioned, if we have smaller lots and larger lots, we have the ability to build houses in different price ranges, all in the area that are very low provided right now and need significant more housing to provide the demand. Transportation, mixed residential development is intended to be designed for walkable neighborhoods. I think you can't think of a better walkable neighborhood than something that's surrounded by the two most prominent trails in all of the Bloomington area. Utilities, again, we'll mention this a little bit more, but we are about as far south as you go to get full utility access. So looking at the density or land use south of where we are is not really appropriate because it does not have the same infrastructure, and which is why you see the comprehensive plan stops where it does. It doesn't go further south, suggesting mixed residential. We have been provided will serve letters for all utilities and social infrastructure, fire department, etc. Open space, we have provided, as I think you've seen before in the PUD, but pocket parks, green squares, common neighborhood parks, and greenways is what it asked for. We've provided a major community park. We're looking at lots of little parks, dog parks, gardens, etc. So very much meeting the intent there. And then development guidelines, meet all HR zoning requirements and staying aligned with a comprehensive plan. We've agreed to, again, a cap of 160 lots to facilitate the spectrum of housing choices. It also aligns with the comprehensive plan mixed residential density. So I've actually heard multiple times in the past, I think Jackie and Rebecca have both said that they believe mixed residential was meant to be between MR and HR. So that's what planning staff has said in the admin meeting and in the PRC meeting, that they believe that mixed residential is meant to be between MR and HR. And we believe that is exactly what we're offering, something that is HR flexibility, but MR or less zoning. Jackie, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just some, you know, there's been obviously a lot going on in the last 2 or 3 months. So we just took some quotes that we've heard in some published papers. So this first one was from President Clements, that the idea has failed. I think this was talking about the multiple housing, and say that so the quote was, "Let's just take a look and build more single family housing to meet the needs of our true constituents." So we're really excited to hear her say that, because that's exactly what we're proposing. So excited to have her support on that idea. The trails are 100% single family homes with a diverse home offering. We're looking at a wide range of people seeking home ownership, right? Same thing, Commissioner Thomas. And the second quote, county officials make their decisions about proposed developments on the basis of relevant zoning and planning ordinance. Again, showing that we are 100% aligned with the comprehensive plan. We have gone through this with staff, and they've shown our alignment with the comprehensive plan nearly perfectly. And then the final one was from a local business affiliate. So the tight local housing market is making it more difficult to retain and recruit talented employees who are critical to the local economy's growth. So the Trails is offering a high quality housing, diverse housing to help solve this concern. So again, we're offering multiple housing ranges, not something that's just low end and not something that's just high end, but a diverse housing offering. Jackie, if you can go to the next slide. So I think we've seen this slide before, but again, just to talk through. So we're looking for an HR rezone to develop 150, 160 homes built over 3 years, 4 to 7 years in 3 phases. Housing, high quality, attainable housing, targeting the 200s to 400s. So again, the idea I think had been mentioned before that we were only building $200,000 houses and they didn't know how that was possible. That's not true. That's never been something we've proposed or said. Diverse housing offering of lot types. So I think, again, this is a really important thing to make sure we understand here is the lots we're proposing in HR, our minimum is 0.14, but our actual average is near 0.2. We have lots that range from 0.14 to 0.3 acres. So again, MR rezone is a 0.2. So we are very, very similar to that. However, we're just seeking more flexibility in what housing offering we can provide. And as Daniel mentioned, we are really looking for unique amenities. We've spent a lot of time trying to look at what we can do with the area. It's such a special site and really offers so much in the way of community development. I think it was mentioned that, this is an area that might destroy the community. I think that this is an area with the park that would really build a community here. And that community park near the trail, the dog park, and then, again, orchards and gardens. Jackie, if you can go to the next slide. So then here we talk about some key environmental commitments. Again, drainage, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it is really a key design focus area. We are actually reducing the drainage. And again, I think there's been a lot of conversation about this and some things that maybe haven't been clear, but just to put it on record, we are reducing the drainage from a outflow of 103.28 cubic feet per second to 17.37 cubic feet per second. So if you can imagine, that's like taking a 5-gallon bucket and filling up a sink with it with 103. That's what currently exists at current site versus taking a glass of water and trying to fill up that sink. If you can imagine which one happens much faster. So we are reducing the outflow off this site after the development, not before, but after the development by 80%. So we will actually be significantly helping the downstream impacts of flooding versus current conditions as a field. Wetlands, we've confirmed boundaries and will remain protected. That's a key part of our area. We've actually worked with Kelsey and others to spend some time on how we're going to do some maybe environmental outreach and some educational signage there. Karst features are concentrated in the Northeast area. And really, we've managed all conservation areas have been identified. We've done an environmental phase 1 study, and we've minimized site disruption as this is really just an existing hayfield. There's very minimal tree removal required, especially versus how much trees we're going to put back. You can go to the next slide, Jackie, please. So this is, again, I think talks a little bit about what we're talking about, HR versus MR. So again, we want to be clear, why are we asking for HR? Some of the key considerations is HR rezone with a lot cap is really the most aligned with the comprehensive plan objectives. It allows diverse home offering. If you go with MR, it does not allow the diversity of home offering that the comprehensive plan is specifically seeking. HR rezone allows housing choices among the full spectrum of demographic groups. The trail's unique shape and trail access requires the flexibility of lot specifications associated with HR. So again, this is not just a square plot of land. This is a plot of land that is bordered by 2 very unique trails that the city and the county have spent a lot of time and money to maintain and up. And we believe that due to that, the flexibility that HR zoning allows will really allow us to utilize that in a way that will bring more enjoyment to the trails and really flourish the area. HR zoning lot size flexibility allows the diversity in home prices, size, and type. If you go to a scenario where you have all MR zoning and it's all 0.2 to 0.25 acre lots, it's really difficult to have significantly different home sizes. It would look weird. It doesn't really make sense. And anyways, it's just not really doesn't fit well for the area. So I think just to, again, talk about this, and I think maybe this is a previous misconception, we are offering and targeting, similar to what we talked about when this was presented as a PUD, of different housing types in different areas. So on this map on the right, you'll see that we are targeting different housing values in different areas. And that is somewhat consistent with the lot size of those areas. I think one thing that's really important to mention is that when you're selling someone something that's a house in the $250,000 to $300,000 range, that's maybe 15 to 2,000 square feet, and they're looking for maybe a paired patio home or a smaller house, they may be the type of people that don't want a huge yard. And so if you're offering them a 0.2 to 0.25 acre lot, they're going to actually not want that product because they're looking for something that requires less maintenance, less upkeep. They want a house. Maybe they're an old retired couple. Maybe they're a young couple that's just married. So that's a type of housing offering versus more single family, individual standing single family 3-4 bedroom houses that they want a yard because they have kids, etc. So we're trying to offer all of those opportunities in this neighborhood. So anyways, you can see the blue, green, yellow, and red areas that we're proposing, and that's just again our target prices and our target housing types. Jackie, if you can go to the next slide, please. So I think this shows a little better when it's in a presentation mode because we have a few things, but I think everyone's seen this before. So this is the terrace park that we're proposing in the northeast corner. We're super excited about this, and our local architect is super excited about it as well. It's something that's going to really just make that area flourish with activity and use. It's going to come directly off the trails. The idea is a BMX bike trails, maybe some walking trails, and then a very natural looking park down near the trails with some boardwalks and educational signs, etc. And then as you go up towards the streets in the neighborhood, there'd be a little kids play area, a pavilion, some lawns for picnicking and hanging out, and then some trails up and down. So again, direct access from the neighborhood to the community. And then again, this is something that's built not just for the neighborhood, but for the community in general. So here's an example of what that park might look like. Again, trying to stick with what's a very natural theme. The idea was to leave as many of the trees as possible. Something that's natural, outdoorsy, low maintenance, and something that people can really enjoy. I think that many of us have been to parks like this. The Rail Trail Park is an example. Places where the kids just come and really enjoy themselves. And it's not just for a neighborhood, it's for the community in that area. Next slide, Jackie. So here's an example again of the dog park and community gardens. Again, just something that we're planning on putting in the community to make it unique, something that's really will drive people to hang out and be more one as a community. I think COVID over the last year and a half has shown us how important our neighbors are, and how much it is really important to enjoy where you are, as you do often spend a lot of time there. You can go to the next slide. So the next probably, 10 slides or so, I'm gonna spend some time talking about the concerns that some of the, that we've either heard through PRC, the admin meeting, or through our neighborhood meetings. I believe that we have spent a large amount of time over the last 6 months really trying to get as much information out as possible about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and address any concerns. So I'm just going to walk through these and just know that the reason we're talking about these specifically is because they've been brought up previously as a concern. So county utility infrastructure, I think it's really important to mention that if you look at the yellow shaded area, that's the area that is served by water, power, sewer, fire, etc. With all of those things. Obviously, some of those are served below, but things like sewer, for example, do not run further south. And so it's very difficult and actually impossible for you to build a higher than a 5-person neighborhood if there's not infrastructure related to sewer. So I think when we talk about density and compare density to the surrounding area, we really need to make sure we compare apples to apples, because apples to apples means that you're including an area that actually can be served and by sewer, etc. So the areas to the left, again, would not authorize the development of greater than 5 houses. Next slide, please, Jackie. So another thing, again, that's mentioned is I heard, we've heard many times over the last few meetings, this density is not consistent with the area. And I guess we'd just like to challenge that a little bit. We have taken, these are just neighborhoods and areas all within a mile of the trails. And again, we focused on the areas that are apples to apples comparisons, areas that are north and west that have sewer service. And right now the trails again is proposing a 3.6 lots per acre, which again is lower than allowable in medium residential. The density of the trails is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And if you see the actual area in this map, the average density of these particular neighborhoods is 3.7 lots per acre. So we are slightly below average for this area. So the statement that this is not consistent with the area is not consistent with what the data shows. And I think, another notable new county neighborhood was Highland Park Estates that was again allotted at 4.3 lots per acre, and we are even lower density than that. So I think just, again, consistency and making sure that everyone has this information. Jackie, if you can go to the next slide, please. So I think this is one of the most debated topics, and I think one that we just want to make sure is very, very clear. We have, right now, the current site runoff flows uncontrolled. It is a field that has been there for, well, hundreds of thousands of years. And it's the drainage design of our development will reduce runoff on this site by 80%. Now, people are going to say that's not true. There's no way that could be possible. You're building houses and creating impervious area. So I think what's really important here is that we are now, based on something that's happened in the last 12 months, the critical watershed requirements have been updated. And we now, by doing a development here, we are now required to follow the critical watershed requirements. And those are significantly reduce the amount of water that you can flow off of a site like this. So that is part of the reason why you'll see again, order of magnitude going from 100+ cubic feet per second of water flow to less than 20. That is why you'll see that we've done that. So we've committed to meet all those requirements. We have a approval from the drainage board, and we have engineered calculations to back that up. In fact, we have offered, there's been a number of people who have neighbors who shared concern with the drainage. We have in fact offered to share our calculations with them, and even offered to have them verified by their independent third party. They have not taken us up on that offer, but we have offered that to them. So we are working with anyone who has concerns. We have spent a lot of time with the drainage board and Kelsey specifically. And yeah, so it's been really a great communication, and we've learned a lot about the area of what we can do to protect this area, Clear Creek, etc. Daniel, do you have anything you want to add maybe on the drainage?
The only thing, I'll just reiterate what you said, Kevin, that we've taken some time and looked at how currently the different basins flow off site. So we're not only reducing the runoff, so right now it flows freely into Clear Creek. So just like in any other project, we would be treating everything, rooftops, roads. So also the water coming off our site should be cleaner, of course, going through the filters of the ponds as well. So if anybody's interested or has more questions about the drainage, we've taken quite some time and we're heard at drainage board and approved for the preliminary design at the time.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, we're very happy to share anyone. This is not a secret. Obviously, we shared all these calculations with the county drainage board, and happy to share them with anyone else who'd like to see. Next slide, please, Jackie. All right, so this was something that was brought up in the past. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but the transmission lines. So just again, want to be clear that with the comprehensive plan, it asks for all utilities to be buried. That is something we will be following. All of the neighborhood transmission lines will be buried. Obviously, the comprehensive plan is not taking into account overhead utility transmission lines. We did actually, in fact, explore trying to do this. As Daniel said, we've been trying to do everything possible to make this the best possible area, and worked with them for Duke for over 4 months. And Duke confirmed about 2 months ago that this was basically impossible to bury the overhead transmission lines. And if we were to try it, they said they're not even sure they could do it, but if we were to try it, it would be upwards of $10 to $15 million just to bury those lines, and would in fact create right-of-ways near the trails, et cetera, that would probably make it less desirable for everybody. We have spent a lot of time with the energy transmission specialist, Ryan, and he's been involved in the layout and the designs for 6 months. He's 100% supportive of our fundamental design and the way we have our lots laid out. And, I think that there was some concern from staff around the living near power lines. I guess just like to mention that obviously if you go up and down north and south on these power lines, there are houses all over them. And then there's been a number of studies in the 90s, some commissioned by the federal government that have proven that there is no long-term health consequences associated with that. So again, just something that has been a concern before that we wanted to bring up and make sure that everyone knows that we're trying to address any concern we hear. Next slide, please, Jackie. So this is, again, this is another concern of the neighbors, of the number of trees associated with the area. Again, I mentioned that this is primarily a field, a hay field, but there are some concentrated trees in the northwest corner and near around the existing house. So the site, we believe, has currently 350 plus trees, and we estimate the development will require removal of approximately 100 of them. Through our development plans, we will be planting at least 200 to 300 trees, which means we will be increasing the total tree count on this site by over 50%. So again, these are going to be younger, stronger, faster growing trees that will continue to facilitate long-term survival. All right, traffic. So this is, again, another concern that I think a number of people have mentioned. We shared all our plans with the Public Works Department, the highway engineer. We've been primarily working with Paul. We've incorporated multiple rounds of feedback on necessary street upgrades on South Victor Pike. And we've taken those into account. We've built them into the layout that you see on the right. All of those details have been managed. The upgrades are aligned between engineering, Monroe County, and the Public Works Department. The neighborhood design and layout encourages alternate transportation, which is something I think that's really exciting about this neighborhood. We really do believe that the people who live here will want to utilize the trails to go to and from the store, go to and from work, go to and from recreational activities, and it will reduce the number of trips per day in a car via a typical neighborhood. And then another thing that I think is really important, and this is something that was mentioned a little earlier, is South Victor Pike was designed as what a quote unquote major collector. That means that there's a significant right-of-way associated with it, 90 feet. And that is why we're able to do these upgrades. And I believe that as a major collector, there is understanding that will be from the highway department, that there should be right-of-way depending on the individual lots, and we can look at that. There should be for expansion in the future. And I think the final piece is that, based on these upgrades, we've gotten confirmation from Paul and others that from the highway department that they don't believe that the increased neighbors in this area and the increased density and the increased number of cars will have a great impact to the traffic in this area based on these additional upgrades. So again, Victor Pike is a major collector and was designed for this type of increase and expansion. Next slide. So I'm gonna hand this over to Jason. I guess you guys are probably tired of hearing from me, so I'll hand it over to the expert to talk a little bit about the karst features. Just want to make sure that you guys hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Jason, are you there?
So I'm looking for Jason. What's his last name?
Crothy?
Crothy. Okay. And which company is he with?
Hydrological.
Yep.
Okay.
Is he on there, Jackie? Or
Seen.
Yes, Jason is on, it looks like.
Okay. Can you allow him to speak?
Yes, he already has the ability to speak. He is unmuted.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Winning. All right, thanks, guys.
All right,
Jason, take it away.
All right. Hi, I'm Jason Crothy with Hydrogeology Inc. here in Bloomington. We're a firm that specializes in geology, specifically karst geology. We've worked for 20 years in the area on karst-related projects, and we did the karst survey for this project. We found total sinkholes on the project, 5 really small ones that are kind of northeast corner that is a wooded area, and there's kind of one larger sinkhole on the southern side, and all of these will be protected with the appropriate setbacks. And this figure here or map here, just to show people the areas in Monroe County that have karst. And so all the orange areas there within the pink outline of Monroe County are areas that karst geology is present. This particular area is very typical for what you'll see in Monroe County as far as what the sinkholes look like. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing concerning as far as what I saw when I looked at the sinkholes. When we go out to look at a sinkhole, you know, I'd be looking for, is there an opening? Are the soils stable? That kind of thing. I didn't have any concerns about what I saw from the sinkholes there, especially when they're going to be protected with the appropriate setbacks. I know Kevin had mentioned there was some concerns about, you know, home stability as far as sinkholes go. In my opinion, there's not an issue of any sort of, you know, catastrophic sinkhole collapse or any concern like that. Really, in my experience, when it comes to karst, is being proactive is your best bet against, you know, having issues like this. And so, you know, we have done the initial karst survey. I spoke to Kevin this week, and you know, he mentioned that they'd be open to having us or another karst expert on the site when they're doing excavation work, just to make sure that there isn't anything under the surface that could cause issues to a home. And like I said, I don't see there being an issue as far as concern about a house, you know, any structural issues to houses at this site. And, you know, like I said, I've worked on for 20 years now. We're the on-call karst expert for Indiana Department of Transportation. And so we'll go out and look at, you know, sinkholes along roadways and things like that. So I don't see an issue here. And, you know, if there's any other questions about karst at the site and the work that we did, I'd be glad to answer any of those.
Great, thanks, Jason. And Jason will be on for questions that we had any this evening. So yeah, I think the key is that there had been mentioned before that this was a karst heavy location, or that there was concern that this was a greater area, more prone to sinkholes. And I think that just want to reiterate that that's not the professional's opinion, and that based on site surveys and obviously 20 years of experience. So I think, Jackie, I just have 2 more things. Number one is, I think, you know, in the admin meeting, Mr. McKim had asked, had we followed up with the neighbors or others about concerns that they had. And I just want to make sure, set the record straight that the answer is yes, we have. I think we've answered over 200 questions from the neighbors and other concerned parties. We have answered those to the best of our ability, given the current information that we have. We have hidden no information from anyone. And in fact, you know, as there was a lot of concern around drainage, I mentioned we offered to share that information and have it verified by an independent third party. As soon as we offered that, we got no feedback from the neighbors. So they decided not to take us up on that offer. Yeah, we have spent a lot of time trying to work with anyone who has concerns. Obviously, know that we can't necessarily change people's opinion, but want to make sure that they have all the facts so that they know what there is and is not to be concerned about, especially related to drainage, given the fact that, again, it's maybe a little bit it doesn't make a lot of sense, but we are going to be reducing the outflow at the end of this project versus what currently exists. So, and then the final piece I'd like to go over was some current concerns around HOA. We don't have a slide on it, but if I can get Mr. Carmen has spent a lot of time with this. Both myself and Donnie have worked in other states where HOAs are more regulated and have some ideas from experiences there that we think will help make sure that the HOA is well funded and well managed. So Mike, if you want to mention some of that.
This is Mike Carmen. Not used to this new format to be able to confirm that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. All right. I'll try to keep this very pointed and brief. In subdivision development in the last 10 years, maybe say a little bit longer, it's been a growing development of the concept of the use of the HOAs, homeowner association, development of restrictive covenants and conditions that apply to the properties. Developers do that primarily because it's perceived to add value, protecting measures on what can be done and how the property be used and maintained, a fairness issue of assessing the lot owners as members of the HOA for the cost for those maintenance, amenities, and management facilities. And in more recent years, that has grown to even acquiring an HOA, actually the county through the planning department indirectly in conjunction with legal and in part based on your actions on some prior petitions have pretty well compelled the use of HOAs to target a means to ensure funding and maintenance of drainage facilities. That's come up on a couple of other projects. And so what you have with the expressed concerns we had back at PUD meeting time about the drainage of the facilities and what happens, how they're going to be maintained, who's going to pay for that, what happens if there's a default by the HOA in not maintaining the drainage facilities. Then we developed a set of covenants that not only details the creation of the HOA with that responsibility, and as well as maintaining common areas generally, but also an enforcement mechanism for the cost of that, how that'd be budgeted and how that'd be enforced, extending the enforcement ability even to the county. Now, not that we want the county to do it, but that was really to answer the question of what happens if the HOA defaults. Margaret, I have to apologize. I'm not sure I understood your question or comment earlier when you talked about liens on lots or homes, but these set of covenants that detail this membership in the HOA, the budgeting, the obligation to contribute through assessments for these expenses and the ability to enforce that contribution through a lien on the property is very typical in subdivision development now and has been for a number of years, but it really is not done in secret. Those would become recorded documents. They appear in the chain of title. If you'd ever happen to look at the Board of Realtors standard purchase agreement form, it has a clause in it about the seller providing to the buyer for review as part of the purchase process before they're committed, any mandatory association documents, homeowner documents. I mean, buyers will come into this neighborhood with full knowledge of this issue of HOA membership, budgeting, maintenance, enforcement capabilities, both by the HOA and as well as by the county, to ensure that they are on notice of this is not financial obligation if they acquire property in this development. And this is not unique for this. We're probably a little bit more detailed, particularly with the issue of county enforcement of the maintenance of the ponds than I've seen any place else, but it certainly is not unique in an overall concept. So that's the HOA and the issue of trying to ensure maintenance of the common areas and specifically the drainage facilities, because that's an important component of this project. And one other comment I would like to make, and I'm not going to repeat Kevin and Donnie and what they did, but on the issue of this location and the comprehensive plan, you know, I've lived through, as some of you have, not all of you that are on the Plan Commission now, but most of you have, or at least coming in tail end of it, lived through the development of the sliding scale subdivision rules and what that meant, the development of the comprehensive plan, the whole generation of concept of the urbanizing area, because that was not in the comp plan before, now, that concept. And you put all that together, and what you and planning department have communicated to people and developers primarily and specifically, but is that build it, but go close to the city to build it. Go where the infrastructure is already there. We don't want you out in the county. We don't want you spreading out. That's what the sliding scale subdivision rules actually would prohibit. Go close to where it is. Don't do long sewer extensions. Don't do long water line extensions. Don't require long new roads. Concentrate the development in the urbanized area, that kind of the donut around the city corporate boundaries. And that's where we want to see the higher density, the more compact development, and do it there. And that's what they're doing. That's what your plan calls for. That's what they're doing. And it's consistent with, frankly, the guidance that this commission has been given out, I think, over the last several years. That's where you want to see. Now, that is not to say that anything goes, no matter what, as long as it's in the urbanized area, any density works and it should be done and no constraints. That's not my point. It is that while this is dense, much more than what you'll see out further in the county, it's in the area exactly where you called for it to be done. It's done by leveraging existing infrastructure, and it's done in a reasonable, responsible manner. You know, usually in large subdivisions, one of the things you have often pushed on, and you have a chapter, the landscaping ordinance, that requires some fairly intense buffering and berms as a buffer between neighborhoods and projects. You have that natural buffer. Where better to get that natural buffer, that natural separation between the neighbors and this project that the two trails provide. And actually between the two trails and Victor Pike, you've got this property is almost encompassed with already existing buffers that separates it and serves that purpose. And we need to take advantage of that, as well as advantage. If we're going to spend the money for the trails, promote the trails use, as have been done both city and county for a number of years now, then a more dense development adjacent to the trails is an important way to leverage those trails and the use of them. So it would submit that this project is well in keeping with the comprehensive plan, as Kevin has gone through in more detail, and would encourage your support of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I think just finally, I'll summarize that, you know, we're very excited to hear any feedback. We will continue to work very, very hard to address any concerns. And I hope that, you know, these slide presentations and this being in the package for you to review at your leisure was informational and informative, that versus some of the things that had been said that were either conjecture or opinions before. And I think the final piece I'll just end on is, you know, we are still really committed to the HR. In fact, you know, when we came as an original PUD, the planning staff, after talking about, hey, we prefer not to be a PUD, which was information we heard loud and clear, the suggestion was to go HR rezone. With a cap of 160 lot, or a cap of lots, and based on, you know, an MR density that would give us well over 160 lots, we stuck with 160 and believe that we are meeting and aligned with what the planning staff had told us at the time 2 months ago, when we made that change. So we really strongly encourage that the comprehensive plan is asking for diversity of housing. It's hard to provide diversity of housing when you're required to provide the same lot size everywhere. And if some of the things that they mentioned related to MR are a concern, you know, if it's 150 homes, you know, Jackie mentioned that there was a minimum of 130 that we could get with MR. So, I mean, we're basically in the same ballpark. So the idea that, that we're asking for something that's dramatically outside of the county's standard, I just believe is not accurate. So, you know, we're very excited to hear your feedback, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, White Oak Endeavors LLC. Thank you. So we will now entertain questions of the Plan Commission for the petitioner. Thompson has her hand raised, and I'd like to recognize her.
I actually had my hand raised at that time because I got booted off and needed to be promoted to panelist again. I don't have a question at this time.
Okay. Are there any members of the Commission who have questions for the petitioner? I have one. I'd like to have a list of all the things the homeowners association is going to be responsible for. I've just heard today that they're going to be responsible for enforcing the easement underneath the power lines. I know there's a park, a dog park, and drainage. What else is the homeowners, the fire hydrants? What else is the homeowners association going to be responsible for?
I think we can very succinctly say that it is common spaces, which is all common spaces. It doesn't matter what is in that common space associated with the neighborhood. The drainage, which again is managed under the OEM, the operations manual with the city in the county, sorry. And then if Southern Monroe does not, a water district does not allow fire hydrants, even though I think that there's a greater than 50% chance that CBU will actually end up serving this based on the conversations we've had with them, then if we were to add fire hydrants, which again, the reason, just to be clear, the reason Southern Monroe is not providing them is because they're not anywhere else in the county in those neighborhoods, and they don't want to create something that's different than what exists there currently. So we are proposing them, and I believe that we will get them over the line there. So it's really common spaces and drainage. That is what the HOA will manage.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the Plan Commission? Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
I actually have a question for staff. I know there are a ton of petitions and letters of opposition and emails of opposition. I hope everyone's taken the time to look through them. There's a lot of repetition, but there's some good information in there. I've heard from someone directly and someone secondhand that there were some calls and other comments made to the planning staff about this petition. Is that available somewhere? Is that listed somewhere? I didn't see it in the packet.
So calls between that have submitted letters of opposition, or can you
residents who called about this petition because they couldn't be here tonight?
I see. Okay. We have heard from one I heard from today, and I don't know, wasn't able to get a hold of them when I returned their call, but they were located on East Shadow Road. But there is in the packet, I believe one of the folks put together a table of contents with all the people that have submitted letters of opposition. To my knowledge, with Rebecca working with the public, we try to encourage everyone to submit something in writing so it can be submitted as part of the packet or attend the hearing. I think for the most part, we've captured a good amount of the opposition so far. So let me get to that table.
Maybe we need to come up with a better way to even just list that, we had, 6 calls from residents who, expressed opposition, but didn't want to write in or whatever. I'm just curious about how that works, because I was amazed at how many people have mentioned this petition to me and their concerns. It's been a bit surprising, honestly. But I wanted to ask about that process, because I had heard from these folks in the last couple of days, and so I know they probably haven't had time to write, and I know they're not going to be able to make it today. So just curious about that.
Yes, there's been a significant number of opposition letters submitted, and they have been well organized by Rebecca. Also, it's been one of the most difficult cases in terms of just case management, opposition letters and support letters even. There's been a lot of vocalization about this petition.
Right. I mean, it's a 195 page portion of the packet to encompass this petition, and most of it is indeed the variety and a lot of there's a lot of repetition where people will pick up on someone's idea and forward it. But it's important to have all that. So I appreciate that that has been compiled because that's important for us to see. Because not everybody can attend at, 6 p.m. or 6:30 or whatever, 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I saw that Mr. Stainbrook had his hand raised.
Thank you. Dr. Thomas mentioned of inclusion in terms of the comprehensive package. It brought to mind for me a form of inclusion that I'm very much interested in. That is bringing together different demographics and different folks. And I was just a little bit disappointed in the blue, yellow, green, and red. I think perhaps in planning a development, although certainly I'm an amateur, I don't, at best, I don't have Kevin's expertise or that of Donnie or Mr. Carmen's background and experience here in Monroe County. I needn't say all of that. But I wonder, as I have grown up, if I have, I've certainly grown older here at my advanced age. And we used to have organic growth, or at least I think of it in that way, where communities and cities and counties expanded naturally. And with that, we had an element of exclusion. No, there was perhaps some exclusion, but inclusion, not always as much as there should have been, certainly, but also the connectivity. There were streets, and already here in Bloomington, you can drive up Walnut, and on the east side, it will be one street name. On the west side, it may be another. I wonder if, Kevin, if there's some way in which the desired outcome could be reached, but that we wouldn't have people, and I'm trying to be a little facetious, and I'm never good at that, but I'm in the blue zone. Oh, you're in the red zone. I'm glad to meet you. Is there some way in having a less stark demarcation? And I realize this was just an example of how they're trying to have a variety of price breaks. But it looks as though in one section there might be more or less value of homes, and in another area, more expensive or less expensive homes. Would Donnie or Kevin?
Yeah, Mr. Steinbrook, I think it's a great point. And I think it's something that we take very, very seriously, the idea of diversity of housing and inclusion, and I mentioned it, community. The community of the area is built on diverse backgrounds. Again, I've lived in 5 different countries in the last 15 years. I know Donnie has as well. And with that comes a real acute knowledge of diversity of culture and income levels. So I think you'll see there's a lot of overlap in prices on these different areas. This was really the red, blue, yellow, and green was just to show that we are really seeking diversity of housing. I think that, we talked about it a little bit, but with lot size comes diversity of housing. And so there's specific areas where lots need to be larger just based on the design of the land. And this is really someplace where we want to build that community. And we believe we're doing that with things like the parks, the dog park, et cetera. These streets, I mean, again, you're talking about an area that's one house away. We're not talking about, one side of the street versus another side of the street. This is houses that are all kind of in the same area, but there is some value. And I think planning has mentioned to us a number of times, there's some value in having similar home types more near each other, even in a community or in a neighborhood. So we've tried to follow all of those guidance from planning staff, as well as and what you're mentioning here. But this is just a preliminary plan. If it's something you'd like to see for us to put smaller lots next to larger lots, we're happy to do that. But there is some homogeneousness that needs to come associated with it, so that it doesn't look weird. Yeah, it's very, very important to us, and that's why we are very key on the community aspect of this neighborhood.
Captain, I salute you for that and for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Ms. Owens?
Yeah, I've had a couple questions written down since I reviewed the packet, and it actually, this particular slide is perfect. It's the one that I was the most interested in. The, you know, I noticed the term affordable housing is not being used, rather the term attainable housing is being used. And, you know, I see the lowest price in the plan is $250,000. When you add in the HOA fee for all of the pieces that are going to need to be covered, I think that is not all that attainable for people that we're pretending that we want to put up housing for. And then on the other end of the spectrum, this is going to take 7 years to build. In 7 years, I don't see a $475,000 house being a $475,000 house. Nobody will spend that kind of money for that sort of density. Also, when you look at this picture, without counting the lots, I noticed that the majority of the land, or at least over 50% of the land, is in the 300 to 425 category, the 350 to 475 category. That doesn't strike me as attainable. And so those are my comments. If you have anything to talk about and come back on those, fine. I think that's something to think really seriously about.
Yes. Yeah, sure. We'll, I think Donnie will address it real quick. Donnie, you might be on mute.
The normal deadline.
I'm on. Yeah, sorry, Kevin, I was on mute. Just had to get off. It's a great question, Ms. Owens, and so we've spoken to many banks to make sure that what we're targeting is something economically viable. We certainly wouldn't want to go bankrupt if we build homes people can't afford. And so we've had numerous local banks, numerous, 4 in total, confirm that a family making $100,000, so 2 income earners at $50,000 a year, so $100,000 total, can definitely qualify for a home at $350,000. Especially right now with the interest rates so low.
So I think that's a key piece to it. Understanding affordability, and we've spent a lot of time, as Donnie mentioned, looking at it. I think the median income in the U.S. is in that $40,000 to $50,000 range. So we believe that this is very, very, very much attainable. And we've used that word attainable because the word affordable has a lot of specific connotations to it, and it starts people getting very excited, saying things bad or good about it. And we have been very, very strategic about staying away from that word. I think Jackie, if you don't mind, maybe going up to the slides where we have the housing or the houses that are available.
So Kevin, real quick, I think we have 2 people that might have questions on this same slide. So can we get to those questions?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to answer that. I was just going to answer her question, just showing she mentioned, that that's not what people are looking for, Ms. Owens. And I just wanted to mention that there is really a significant need, just given the shortness of supply. I think it's the 4th slide, Jackie, the 4th slide. That will go down, one more down. You can see that there is a need all the way up through the $450,000, $500,000 range. And that need is diversified all through the $200,000 to $400,000 range. So we believe that our neighborhood, given the HR rezone with the cap, will allow us the flexibility to meet all of those needs, not just one category, which is what we were concerned with.
Thank you. You hear the questions, and then I'll come back if I can. Thank you.
Steve, does she want to speak now while we're on this subject? Dee, would you like to speak now, and then we'll go to Mr. McKim and then Commissioner Thomas?
No, I just heard, when I heard Jackie say it's on the same slide, that possibly there'd be something here that would inform my opinion, but also considering the fact that right down the middle of the thing is running overhead power lines, you're going to have a really hard time selling that kind of higher priced housing. I don't care what the median or the average is. I mean, Robert Reich and Wilt Chamberlain averaged 6'2" in height. Okay, I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me because that is not necessarily what's here. I do understand what the housing market looks like as I watch it. And again, these houses are not going to be popped up tomorrow. Things are going to change between now and then. And I think that there's much to be considered. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
With all due respect, that's the difference between median and mean, but fair enough.
Thank you. Mr. McKim and then Commissioner Thomas.
Thanks. I wanted to ask a question about the drainage. First of all, I appreciate your presentation and that you have specifically answered so many of the questions that we have heard from members of the public and from my colleagues. I like those kinds of direct answers are really very much appreciated. As far as drainage goes, though, several times I think you did say that, of course, you made the case that the amount of runoff is going to be significantly lower at the end of the project. I guess my question is, at any point during the construction, I mean, if the project's going to take 7 years to build out, will there be some time in the interim where the downstream impacts are going to be greater?
Mr. McKim, that is a fantastic question. So the answer to that question is as the way drainage is designed and the way it's implemented during the platting phase is you're required to manage the runoff of anything you disturb. So we are going to be building the infrastructure that will be managing the runoff of anything that we are disturbing during the phases. So for phase one, we will build whatever infrastructure the drainage department tells us is required for that phase that we are building. As you can imagine, there's not going to be any reason for us to build, for example, in the northeast corner, there's a drainage basin there. There won't be any reason for us to build that given the topography of the site until we start to work in that area. Now, if we decide to for example, to excavate and clear the entire site all at once, because that's the right answer for whatever reason, then we would be required to put in the drainage basins for the entire site at that time. So the answer is throughout the process, we will be decreasing it. As we build more, we will be decreasing the runoff more and more and more. So until we get to the end, then we will have decreased it to the maximum that we've just described, which is over 80%.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. I think one of them has already been addressed, which is, you know, we hear a lot about the housing situation today, and a lot of that is not housing stock, but economics. And so, you know, a change in the interest rate changes things. And I also want to point out that no matter what intentions a developer has, they may run into higher costs. They, you know, so many things may happen but we cannot hold them to a particular home value. That would be impossible to do, especially over 7 years. It's not fair to them, and it's certainly not fair to the public to offer a guarantee of a housing price. As one of the opponents pointed out, and I'm going to raise this, and I don't expect an answer, it's really more commentary. If, you know, this idea, which sounds great on the surface of, hey, we're going to have this park and it'll be open to anybody and the trails are going right by, and wouldn't this be lovely? Anybody can stop by. That increases the insurance cost for the homeowners association. So I just want to point that out. And on the very last slide of the developer's presentation, I think, yeah, she's going to get to it. Nope, next one, the goodbye, thank you slide. There you go. So just a reminder that this is Monroe County, not Bloomington. And I say that tongue in cheek, but I also say that seriously because we are a rural area. And the area surrounding Bloomington is certainly not that right now. And that's something we have to continue to struggle with, is where does, you know, we have this in our comp plan, keep rural rural and urban urban. And this is one of those in-between places, and that gives me a lot of pause. So I just wanted to state that as well. And lastly, I do want to thank you for your service. So with that, thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Thomas. And I always, when people tell me that, I say, thank you for my undergraduate and my graduate degrees, which were paid for by the Air Force. So thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've completed the petition. Oh, Mr. Garitas has a question.
May I add one more comment too?
Yes.
Just, you know, there's certainly a lot of remonstrance, and there's no disputing that, and it's you know, it's been consistent over time, and we appreciate everybody's thoughts and opinions, just as Kevin said. But do want to make the point that we have now sought and received a lot of support, including from the direct neighbors. 3 of our adjacent neighbors, including the most adjacent to us, Mr. Kiefaber, has signed a card of support for us. And I'm sure if we need more support, he'd be willing to come as well, in addition to the other 2, and in addition to everybody else around town that has as well. So just want to make sure that gets appreciated as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garitas?
Yeah, just a couple quick points, I think. One, I think all the letters in the packet are good. I appreciate, I think it was Kevin Schmidt who talked a little bit and presented the table about the real estate market as it sits now, and then basically the BEDC in their letter had the same outline. And I think we heard on some petitions several months ago information that was very near to those same statistics. So that's helpful to put some of that in context. With respect to the density, I'm trying to understand, is the petitioner going for a high density residential because there are lot sizes that actually fall below the 0.21 acre that's in the medium density residential? Because the density that Kevin Schmidt noted was 3.6 units per acre, which is less than 4.8, but I think it's the difference in how staff calculates the developable land versus the gross area that the petitioner has calculated. So from the petitioner's standpoint, is the 0.14 acre minimum lot size, is that the driving force for why you are asking for an HR?
That's another wonderful question. Yes, that is a key piece to it, but not the only one. So I think we mentioned before, and I'll reiterate it again since you asked. So Jackie mentioned that we could get a minimum of 130 lots in MR, potentially more depending on how it was actually laid out. Right now, there's 2 major pieces. One is the actual lot width, which is 50 versus 60 feet in MR versus HR. And then the lot size, which is 0.14 versus 0.21. So we believe that again, if you look at this slide, the key here is a diverse housing offering, which is exactly what the comprehensive plan asks for in mixed use residential, is only attainable in HR with a cap. And again, if we believe that cap needs to be 150 homes, you know, we're willing to look at that, but it is the flexibility to build lot sizes that are varying in size is very, very important to us to meet what we believe. And I mean, I've read it and quoted it specifically, that we believe the comprehensive plan specifically asks for. So that is one of the key areas, is the lot size. And again, if you look at our average lot size, I think I mentioned it's about 0.19 to 0.2. So we're very close to the average lot size for mixed use resident or medium residential. But we do believe that the high density residential with a cap allows us to stay at that kind of number of houses that people are interested in the medium residential, but allow the flexibility of housing type.
And Kevin, why don't you just add on to how this buttresses up against what our PUD was, but why we switched, and that our PUD had this diversity as well, but we were trying to simplify with the reason.
Right. So I think that, you know, when this PUD had our PUD had a very similar diversity. And in talking with planning and getting feedback from the planning commission, that we were told, hey, we don't like PUDs because they're difficult to manage, because they have a lot of different exceptions, et cetera. We would prefer a straight rezone. And again, talking with planning staff, the suggestion was a HR rezone with a cap based on what we had been offered in the PUD. So for the last 2 months, we believed that that was what was sought by planning staff. And that's the reason that we went with that particular setup. And again, believe that it provides the most consistent product associated with the comprehensive plan.
And just to be clear, you know, Jackie earlier quoted how many homes we could build based on HR, and it's it's well over 200. Jackie, what was that number again? If we, that could be fully utilized with HR?
I think it's 371 or something.
Right. It's well into the 300s, and that is not our intent. And that hence why we're very willing and have offered the cap of 160.
So I think, yeah, Donnie, that's exactly right. And so the statement of, there's no other HR in the county, we are 100% supportive of that. And we don't believe that this is truly quote unquote HR. It's a mix because of the uniqueness of the site.
I appreciate you answering my question. Thank you.
Yep.
The other question I've got is, just to comment, if I look at this site and you look at how the stormwater it looks to me is being managed, the fact that it falls in multiple directions allows that lack of concentration of flow in any one area.
That's exactly right.
Be dispersed in a very uniform way, and I can see how that drainage can be controlled at the level that they're talking about, and of course our stormwater board will handle that as well. And then I also understand staff's recommendation, and I'm not going to get in the weeds on this conversation we started off with, but I understand staff's comment, the last comment they had in their discussion for recommending MR, to have a 160 lot cap is just another constraint on what would be a standard rezone. So the 160 lot cap is just something that this staff and future staff are going to have to police.
Right.
Is that the only thing, Jackie? Is that the only unique attribute of what they're asking for from a straight rezone that staff is going to have to monitor and track over the years, the number of lots?
Yes, I think the HOA document would also have some information, but that's pretty standard. So that's the main change.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's all I've got, Margaret. Thank you very much for embellishing me.
Bernie. And Mr. McKim?
Actually, Bernie's last question was exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay, thank you. It shows
these are attendees. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that we have completed the petitioner's presentation, and we now go to those who are opposed or in favor of the petition. So if you are in favor of the petition, would you please raise your hand? Okay, so John and Susan, if you would like to speak, could you unmute yourself?
Tech services, if you could assist with the timer for
I'm sorry, I am opposed to this project.
We will call on you in just a second.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Warren, if you would like to speak, we have a time limit of 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Dave Warren. I live in the Fieldstone neighborhood on the west side of the county, and I would like to comment in support of this project. I think this is a really great way to make use of many great existing assets in the area. It's right on the Clear Creek Trail, which connects to the Bloomington Rail Trail and the B line. You've got Clear Creek Elementary, Bachelor Middle School, both great MCCS schools. I don't think anyone pointed out there's probably a new library branch going in right by Bachelor Middle School. And it'd be such a shame if, we only had $40,000, $600,000 homes in this fantastic area. And that is what is that's what is going to go in this area with the existing estate residential zoning. Also, our family, 4 years ago, our family moved within Monroe County, and it was brutal. We had several offers on several places that fell through because there were just so few homes available in our price range that we could afford. And now fast forward 4 years, prices are up 40% from where they were 4 years ago. It is really hard to find a home. We have several friends who are looking for homes. It is rough. And so I ask that you think about, all of the families in this county who are looking for places to live, and just keep in mind that the most unattainable home is a home that isn't built, because homes that aren't built, especially where they're needed in the urbanized and urbanizing area of the county, makes housing throughout the county more expensive. So thank you for the opportunity to comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Andy, you have your hand raised. We have a 3-minute time limit.
Also, as a note, this timer does have the tone that will go off at when there's 30 seconds left, and then again when the time is up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and unmute Andy now.
Hello, I was going to make a comment on the whole, do you want 35 to 40 homes in the $750,000 range versus 160 homes from the upper 200s to the 450 range. But Mr. Warren basically already made that comment, but I think it's an important one. And I think part of that reason is I don't know that people understand what an important price range that 350 to 400 represents in our town right now. At lower price ranges, you're really not going to build any new product. And in terms of single family housing, especially when a paired townhome is not considered a single family housing product, there's no price relief for anybody in any lower price ranges right now. The only thing that'll provide them, the only market is what's already in the market. Basically, we're not going to be able to build new product to satisfy and help those people that are first time buyers, unless there's more $300,000 to $450,000 houses that people in the $150,000 to $250,000 range can move up into. That will alleviate our entry, very bottom entry level housing needs as well. One other point I would make too is that I'm a real estate broker, so I deal with this a lot. I have people come in from out of town, they're here for a weekend, they want to go look at houses. I'm used to having maybe 15 or 20 houses to show people. Now there might be 2 or 3. That's a marked difference. And also too, the type of housing that they're suggesting to be built absolutely will be bought by people and will serve a market share. I've heard a lot of comments tonight about what people don't want to buy. I don't think any of that's factual. I know what people want to buy, and these are the types of products they will want to buy without question. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Jill Robertson.
Just checking to see if I'm unmuted. Okay, fabulous. So my name's Jill Robertson, and I'm the oldest daughter of Don and Jan Robertson, who actually owned the property. Back in 1970, my parents purchased the property looking to the future, not only for themselves, but really for the community as a whole. They wanted to do something and invest in the city. Many of you may know, or you may not know, that my father was an attorney. And he was looking out not only for his family, but for the community as a whole, and bought this property. And we had the pleasure of growing up on that space, and have had a lot of fun times. But now we are at the point where my mother is ill, and we are in need of being able to sell the property. One of the things that happens in Monroe County, and I know that if any of you search your hearts, you know this to be true, is that a lot of times the requirements and the prohibitions keep landowners from being able to sell their property in a way that is helpful to their own families. I remember not that long ago, it was probably within 5 to 7 years, going to one of the planning commission, the county planning commission meetings. And there was a gentleman there who spoke about land that he owned on the north side of Monroe County. He actually owned like a tree farm. And he was concerned that he would not be able, based on the PUD that was being developed at that time, he was very concerned he would not be able to sell his property, nor actually sell any of the trees for income, which he needed. He was in his early 80s. And we unfortunately find ourselves in a similar situation. We need to be able to sell the property to care well for my mother. I'm sure any of you can be empathetic to that particular need. But I also want to say one other thing. Professionally, I work for an agency that serves HUD. So we deal with housing on a daily basis. We work around the country and we see a lot of people in need of housing. And this is an opportunity for the county to really step up and allow an attainable housing community to be developed in Monroe County. It's much needed in Monroe County, and many places around the country are desperate for decent, affordable housing or attainable housing, whatever words you want to use. So I really ask the Planning Commission to really take to heart some of these points and some of the considerations that might be impactful for our community, our family, and others that are listening and trying to decide what they will do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And we all from the county give your mother our warmest wishes and regards. I'd like to, are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? If there are none, would those who would like to speak in opposition to this petition please raise their hands? So we'll begin here with Patty and Dave Bush.
Hi, my name is Patty Bush, and I live at 1250 West Church Lane. I am an adjacent property owner to the proposed petition site, which is appropriately zoned RE1. The commissioner's packets include over 100 letters of remonstrance to this proposed development. These letters include concerns related to density, traffic, noise, which are very important issues. Other valid and documented concerns are the critical watershed, flooding, pollution, more impervious surfaces, and many environmental impacts. This petition site is on a very steep hill. The site's stormwater runoff will increase in volume due to the significant increase in impervious surfaces and the removal of mature trees and green space. The current detention basin design and its outflow will not support stormwater runoff such as we experienced in February 2019, as stated by the current MS4 coordinator. Victor Pike has been described as a major collector. However, Victor Pike is a narrow, rural road and a road that floods. I urge you to review the letters of opposition and pictures of area flooding with property damage from similar development upstream. Many adjoining neighbors, some living here more than 45 years, realize urbanization of this rural area is not in our best interest. Thank you for listening.
This is Dave Bush. May I, Jackie, may I have an additional 3 minutes? I won't take the full 3.
Yes, you may.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your allowing that. Dave Bush, for the past 22 years, I've lived at 1250 West Church Lane. I also am an adjacent property owner to the petition site, which is currently, in my opinion, appropriately zoned RE1. The commissioner's packet includes over 100 letters of remonstrance to this proposed high density development in opposition of that development. Of those, 36 are from fellow property owners who live adjacent or very near the petition site. I think there were 3 that the petitioners indicated are in support. Well, we have 36 in opposition. Common themes have emerged from these objections, which center around density, traffic, and noise. Other valid and documented concerns are the impacts of development in the Clear Creek watershed, including flooding, increased stormwater runoff from increased impervious surfaces in the watershed, and increased stream and groundwater pollution. The petitioners have attempted to reassure these concerns by including minimally sized dry retention basins that are designed to hold a 100-year flood event. Well, what is the 100-year flood event? Does not mean that the event will happen once in 100 years. A 100-year flood event means that there's a 1 in 100 chance of meeting or exceeding that amount of rainfall every time it rains. Certainly, this is a threshold that can be exceeded more and more frequently in our time of accelerated climate change. And once those detention basins are overtopped, the whole dynamic changes and you go from retention to a flash flow right into the streams. So they only work up to a 100-year event. At that point, in excess of that, they're essentially non-functional. The residential estate 1 zoning was conceived to allow for a natural transition from the hustle and bustle environment of high density urban and suburban living to the tranquil and peaceful environment of rural living. Just because a property sits along a walking trail doesn't mean it's an appropriate site for a high density development. Many of the people who submitted remonstrance statements in opposition to the proposed development indicated that they enjoy using these sections of the Clear Creek and Bloomington rail trails to get away from their urban and experience the rural splendor of Monroe County. Make no mistake about it, the petitioners have proposed building these $250,000 to $400,000 homes on this site in high density proximity, not because they want to do Bloomington, Monroe County a favor. They're proposing this density because their business plan tells them this density will provide the maximum financial return on their investment dollars. Understand that. Why should we be left dealing with the after increased pollution?
Mr. Bush, your time is finished. I'd like to allow them to finish their sentence after the buzzer rings anyway. So the next person to speak, I'll recognize are John and Susan. Each would have 3 minutes. So John and Susan, if you are here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Susan, yes.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, it will just be me speaking. My husband chooses not to speak, but he is opposed to the development. I have 2 main things that I want to present. First of all is the usage of the 2 trails. I'm a very frequent user of the Clear Creek Trail. I'm there at least once a week, and there are walkers, strollers, bicyclists, rollerbladers, even roller skates, dogs. I've even seen a person walking their cat on that trail. I'm concerned about the crossing of Victor Pike at that crossing point, and the 2 places where the rail trail and the Clear Creek Trail both cross that road. Those are really high roads now. The traffic on those roads is high, and I feel afraid sometimes crossing those trails. The site is not that clear, and I cannot understand why this development is not going to add traffic to both of those roads. Secondly, I am concerned about the density. I just feel like that comment that was previously made that there is a buffer between urban and rural for a reason. 1 home or 1 unit per acre is a reasonable amount to to flow from a urban area into the rural area. And I also thought that on one of those slides, it indicated that on these particular units, the backyard size is 10 feet. I hope I read that wrong. That those lot sizes seemed terribly small. If they are supposed to be for a family, I don't understand how children can really play in a yard that is so small. And if they're supposed to play in that terrace park, that didn't look like a very hospitable, welcoming place either. I think the whole area needs more trees, it needs more grass, it needs fewer roads, bigger lots, and let's try to keep a higher quality of living in our Bloomington area. I've lived here since 1957, and I've seen a tremendous amount of change in Bloomington in that length of time. Not all of it's good, but we're striving to maintain a wonderful community here. And I would just urge the county to continue with that fine tradition. Thank you, everyone, for your input and your work, and for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Susan and John. Okay, Mr. Loftman.
Okay, am I on now? Looks
Yes.
like, very good, I see my text. As always, you all are so patient with everybody and this process, I appreciate it. Jackie was very clear that HR is inappropriate. And I agree, HR is inappropriate. Mr. Schilling, as counsel, said, you can't approve MR if the petition is for HR, unless the petitioner's amended. Very clearly, the petitioner said HR, HR, HR. They are not amending. So either you've got to approve the HR against the advice of your own staff and over 100 people opposing to it. And we don't even have an accurate plan presented. The plan that they've shown has 145 lots, but they say that we're going to have 160. Well, this should not be approved under any circumstances. The homeowners association, if they have any sense about it, the first thing they're going to do is ban the general public from the parks or just get rid of the parks, because that's going to be a children's play park and a dog park. How much is the liability insurance going to be on that? It's a completely unsustainable plan as is, and it should certainly be defeated because staff feels it is inappropriate. The petitioner says that a 1.4 acre lot is consistent with a 2.1 acre minimum lot. It's just, there's no, it's almost 50% bigger. It is 50% bigger. And then they say, well, the average would be. So it doesn't have anything to do. The average has nothing to do with this. And I hate to get personal, but I feel it's important. The petitioner is saying, oh, we've worked with all the neighbors on at one of the earlier meetings, they showed a tree diagram, which I had been trying to get. They'd send me an incomplete one. I said, please send it to me. And they refused. And they said that they wouldn't send me anything unless I would accurately portray how nice they are. This is an HR petition. You all should evaluate it as an HR petition. It is an inappropriate HR petition, and you should refuse it and deny it tonight. If they want to come back with a new plan, fine. Again, thank you for all your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Loftman. Ms. Simonian?
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, thanks. Bear with me, a new computer. Hi, my name's Jean Simonian. I'm a city resident and don't usually speak at County Plan Commission meetings, But the recent upzoning issue in the city and the proposed annexation of county land have made it clear that the issues of one affect the other. I'm against this increased density proposal for a few reasons. The density proposed here assumes a generalized housing shortage that, in fact, I don't find evidence of. It's based upon an assertion that's been popularized by the mayor that we are experiencing a 1% to 2% population growth rate that is not supported by the best current data. The Indiana Business Research Center at the Kelley School has reported this year to the governor's workforce cabinet that our projected population growth in Monroe County is less than 0.7%, which is the historical average, which is seconded by the American Community Survey projections. US birth rates have been in decline since a high in 1963, when a woman statistically had 4.4 children. By 2006, that rate was halved to 2.1. Today, it's only 1.7. The issue facing the greater US economy moving forward is a younger population too small to buy the houses the baby boomers will be leaving. This dynamic is reflected here in Monroe County, again, reported to the governor's workforce cabinet by the Business Research Center, that our local population is hollowing out. Last year was the first in which elderly population growth exceeded younger growth. In short, the number and size of existing families is shrinking, and the notion that if only we would build more family-friendly housing, the population would grow, is frankly magical thinking. Furthermore, there's demographic evidence mounting that projects a COVID baby bust, which is a consequence documented pretty commonly after recessions or national disruptions, like a pandemic. While we have a certain amount of pent-up demand for ownership, the current market availability of single-family homes at or below $250,000 suggests that only a small percentage of that demand has the financial readiness to buy, which raises the question of whether or not the prevailing wage paid really is sufficient to afford homes within this price point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simonian, for all of those facts and that interesting information. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak against the petition? And I would also ask, is there a way to ask the callers in if they have would like to make a comment?
So there's one phone call and one person calling in, and it's Daniel Butler. So
I
he's
see.
been able to speak. Yeah.
I see. So
and Paul.
Well, given that, we move back to the members of the Plan Commission for further discussion. Mr. Enright Randolph.
Yes, I want to follow up kind of with the last question that we had to staff that precipitated from Mr. Garitas. So I guess the reason that you're not supporting this petition is strictly due to density?
Who are you asking this of, Mr. Enright Randolph?
To staff, because when the question was asked earlier, that I guess is one of the main criterias that I think I observed, but I just wanted to ask the question a little more directly.
So, John, to answer your question, the staff recommendation for medium density residential with the basis for the recommendation was on the first page. So it included a number of items, but density, certainly intensity of the residential use. So high density residential is the most intense use of the residential spectrum. medium density is medium, low density is low, and then you get into the rural zones. So I think our basis and recommendation is listed there if you have any further questions.
Yeah, I just, one follow-up question. So if the petition was proposing medium density, would staff be supporting that proposal? I know that might not be a question you can ask. It's just, it's a little back and forth on me to understand what position staff is really taking if the proposal was for MR versus an HR.
Yeah, so John, the recommendation that staff has made is that we would recommend a rezone to medium density residential, so MR.
Okay.
That would be a separate petition. I mean,
it would have to be amended, right?
Yeah,
as Mr. Schilling pointed out,
yes.
The petitioner would have to agree to that and amend their petition, which to their points earlier, they're recommending they would like a rezone to HR, high density residential.
Right, but when it says it appropriately fits, doesn't really cut to the, you know, the meat of the sandwich of, yes, the staff will support this MR if that was what the petitioner was pursuing. Thank you. You did an excellent job answering my question. Sorry I have to put people in the hot seat. It's not one of my favorite things to do, but thank you so much. I appreciate all your time and effort and everyone else within the planning department.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the Plan Commission who would like to discuss this further, make a comment? And is there any, if not, is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Or should we just continue it to the next meeting?
Yeah. Jackie, we'd like a chance to respond.
Sorry.
Which in the past we've been given.
I'm sorry, your time is completed.
I have my hand up and my question was actually going to be to the petitioner.
Yes, Mr.
Are you prepared to consider amending your petition or even discuss that today? Or if you observe that there's not tremendous support, would you rather discuss that at a following meeting to address the elephant in the room?
Yeah. So Mr. Randolph, I'll answer that. It's a good question. I'll be honest with you. We're a little bit surprised. We were, as you were, very surprised by the staff's recommendation, given the fact that 2 months ago they told us to do this, that they thought this was the vehicle that brought this particular development to site. I guess what I'm a little confused on, and I would like a little bit more clarity here, is we're talking about a difference of maybe 20 houses. And I guess what we're trying to do people keep saying we're doing HR, but in reality, what we're asking for is the diversity of HR, but the density of MR, which is exactly what the comp plan requests. It is literally to the T what the comp plan requests. And so I'm a little confused, I guess, and this is we're willing to do something, but we're not really sure we understand why this is not okay and what the difference is between MR and HR relative to this petition. Yes, of course, MR and HR are very, very different, but in this particular case, they're not. In fact, we're asking for something that is less than the MR density. So I guess we're always open and have been for the last 6 months open to discussing, but what we haven't gotten and we don't feel like we understand is what is it exactly that is not okay with the petition as is relative, but then would be okay under MR, right? If you understand my point, Mr.
I understand, and I think Mr. Garatas went right to the point with the variance of lot sizes that are allowed in the HR. I'm not against that. I think that could help with a number of different components with, purchasing of land and such. ultimately, I'm going to put my position out there, and I'll be concluded after this. With so much remonstration and staff not supporting this, I'm hesitant to be in favor. Now, if it's just the number of homes being built and we're trying to reduce that to be more appropriate with that first graph we saw that was what, 130, and they're looking to build 160. If somehow we reduce it by 30 lots and staff can get behind that, then I could most likely support it moving forward. But right now at this point, it's quite a challenge, just to let you know where I stand.
Thank you, Mr. Wright Randolph. And I'd like to recognize our planning director, Larry Wilson, then Mr. McKim, and then Ms. Owens.
First of all, I want to respond about the comprehensive plan calling for mixed residential housing. That is a statement in the comprehensive plan. It does not mean that we want every development to have mixed residential housing, but that the area that's under the study have a mix of housing. Otherwise, we'd have to basically say we want each development to have a mix of housing. And that's, the plan does not anticipate that we're going to have a mix in every development. What we're looking for in the community, in the neighborhood, is a mix of different housing types. Secondly, in regard to the recommendation for MR is a 0.21 acre lot. That is a fairly small lot for Indiana. To compare, the HR lot is the highest density we have for single family housing with a 0.14 minimum lot size. San Francisco's average lot size is 0.13. This is roughly the same minimum lot size, the lot size as the average in California. We felt that given the lack of many of what we consider appropriate urban amenities for HR, the highest density for single family housing, such as immediate access to mass transit, proximity of shopping. I mean, the closest shopping is a mile away. The lack of a way to do this site in a manner where you actually have blocks with cross traffic, ways for people to walk without having to go around a looping drive to get to play with the neighbor's kids. All those issues, really, and this is a transition area between rural and urban. So that's why we felt that the density that we would recommend where there are sewers would be MR in this area. And we get criticized for being negative, so we wanted to basically say, we think we would support an MR zone because based upon the plan, we feel that is the appropriate level of zoning. If it's going to be subdivided into smaller lots, MR would be the way to go. However, we make a recommendation. The plan can, we just make a staff report, basically what we think our findings are. It's up to the Plan Commission to make a recommendation to the commissioners and up to the commissioners to make a determination as to what the proper zoning for this parcel should be. And we're trying real hard not to get tied up into the political nature of this, situation by saying what we think the plan says. If you're going to rezone it for a subdivision which requires sewer, MR would be the appropriate zoning for that, with a minimum lot size of 0.21. You don't have to it's not a case where if you make the minimum lot size 0.21, you have to divide the entire property up into 0.21 acre lots. That's the minimum lot size. You have flexibility built in how you work through lots around. You could have some lots that are 0.21, some lots that are 0.34. And that's the way subdivisions work. It's based upon topography. It's not a straight grid where you're entitled to divide up a flat piece of paper into the maximum number of lots. And so, again, we try to come forth with what we felt was an appropriate zoning. We have said in the comprehensive plan that if sewer and water is available, that would support a more dense housing type and subdivision. So that's where the MR recommendation came from.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson, for providing that background, that comparison, your justification, and also instruction. I really appreciate it. Mr. McKim, Ms. Owens, and then Mr. Stainbrook.
Yes, I do appreciate the guidance that staff has given on MR and the thoughtfulness by which they've approached trying to address the comprehensive plan, the urbanizing plan. I think that is a good recommendation. I think this comparison to the Bay Area is absurd and over the top, honestly, and that is not the kind of density that this petitioner is asking for. Hence the cap on the number of lots. What they are asking for is the flexibility of HR, not the density of MR, or not the density of HR. But that said, I do appreciate the guidance on this. I did have a question though about wanted to return to the drainage issue. So one of the members of the public made some fairly specific, I guess allegations is the best word I can think of at the moment, but allegations that the drainage features are dramatically undersized for what would be needed, and to be able to handle the 100-year flood, the 1 in 100 chance of happening every time it rains. So I'm wondering if the petitioner could address those concerns.
This is Daniel with Bynum Faneuil. You want me to address those now?
I would, thank you.
So we went through a few iterations with the drainage board, and we have software that gives us a size basin, and then we follow that up with kind of schematic grading. And we break the site into basins depending on the current site topography, and determine a certain amount of runoff that would go to each one of those basins. And so with using some calculations, we determine the current site runoff, that everything here is ultimately flowing to West Branch, Clear Creek, and into Clear Creek. So we take every piece of the site to its current direction, and then we do an ultimate off-site. And so actually the one problem with the overall map that we give is that it's 100 scale, meaning everything looks a little bit smaller than it actually is. These basins will be quite large in order to handle a 100-year flood. Even if they were to overtop, we always have measures in place for emergency overflow to handle that and appropriately take it into the creek. And so that is true, though. Our calculations do show, and we're able to achieve what is required now in critical watersheds, and we're going to hold to that in our additional calculations. So we are committing to that in our additional calculations. And this is approved, will further show that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Ms. Owens?
Thank you. Mr. Wilson really said a great deal of what I was thinking, but because something meets or says it meets the spirit of the comprehensive plan doesn't mean that it meets the comprehensive plan. Obviously, we wouldn't be having a discussion about the sizes if there were any issue. If it met that part of the comprehensive plan, then we'd all say, okay, that's great. I think that the medium density recommendation is fair. I think that I don't know if the remonstrators would be even interested in that, but having over 100 remonstrators against this particular petition and some of the good numbers that I've heard presented, as well as just emotion and opinion, but especially, of course, the numbers speak to me loudly. And I think that we need to pay attention to our staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owens. Mr. Stainbrook?
Given where we are at this point, I move that we reject this petition, or perhaps better said, move the petition forward to the Board of County Commissioners with a negative recommendation.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Preliminarily, we need a motion to waive the second hearing.
If I may, based on what we received from the planning staff, could we have another meeting to consider the latest recommendation, please?
Mr. Donnie, but you were not recognized, and a motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Stainbrook, are you going to amend your motion to waive the second?
Yes, if I may, Chairperson, in terms of Larry's in terms of Larry's statement. But with that, as you pointed out, we do have a motion on the floor, and
would you amend it to waive the final hearing? Is that?
Yeah, that was my intent. I haven't spoken well with that. But yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
D. Owens, is that a motion you second then, the amended motion?
No, I didn't understand that. This is the preliminary hearing, and there is another opportunity for a final hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Trying to kill it dead. Right?
So D, the recommendation is if you would like to second Mr. Stainbrook, he's saying recommend denial to the county commissioners and waive the final hearing. And if you, would you like to continue your second, or do you remove your second?
I understand. I will go ahead and leave my second on, yes.
I have a point of order, and it's due to procedure. After there's a motion and a second, is there not any further discussion, or do we go straight to roll call? Because I've served on numerous boards, and after some motions and second, we bring it back to the commission for final comment.
I think you do that during your vote. That's our tradition in the county, is that—
Well, by the rules of order, Dave Schilling's here. I'd like to hear our legal's opinion. Robert Rules of Order is what we are supposed to be following.
There we go. Yeah, Tron, we really don't follow Robert's Rules of Orders. It's generally just the president is charged of maintaining order. So I think it's up to Margaret as to whether this proceeds or not.
And I feel that we have heard from the members of the Plan Commission. The members of the Plan Commission have asked and received feedback from the petitioner. We've heard from the public. We brought it back to the Plan Commission to discuss it among ourselves further. And I feel that we've exhausted that. A motion has been made. It's been seconded. And I think it's time to call the roll. So, Mr. Wilson.
I have another point of order. We were still at the Plan Commission discussion phase, and you did not ask for a motion at that time. And then when Mr. Stainbrook raised his hand and proceeded to make a motion, that could have stifled other Plan Commission members from speaking due to the fact that we weren't prepared to hear a motion because we were still in the discussion phase. So one, I just want to make that clear and on the record. And two, you, Madam President, please provide and proceed as you wish.
Okay, well, I would just like to say—
Point of order.
Mr. Stainbrook, no other hands were raised at the time for discussion. That being said, if there is a desire to bring it back to discussion among the Plan Commission members, I'd like to have a motion from one of the members of the Plan Commission to bring it back to discussion.
Margaret, point of order.
Yes, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. I know this is getting confused. Margaret, you're kind, almost as kind as Jackie that I mentioned the other day in handling all of us disruptive people, but I shouldn't take our time musing over that. But again, thank you. And Tron, I was on your side mentally. I wasn't going to interject, but I thought you had a good point of order in spite of David Schilling Esquire. I think you had a real good point. But now you've lost me. There had been discussion. And I offered a motion. There's nothing to preclude that if the chair recognized me. Now, you may think that was, I don't know what, discomforting or inconvenient, but Madam Chair, there is a motion and there is a second. Please, let's move on.
Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Okay, the vote is on the petition to rezone the trails, proposed trail subdivision to HR with commitments to limit the size of number of lots that are HR or small lots. Let me start over again. The motion is to send a negative recommendation to the commissioners on the REZ 21-1 petition to amend the zoning map from RE1 to HR for the trails, formerly White Oak, on the 44.07 acre parcel located at 4691 South Victor Pike. A vote in favor is a vote to both waive the second hearing and to send a negative recommendation to the Monroe County Commissioners in regard to the petition to amend the zoning map. I will now call the roll. Jeff McKim?
No.
Jim Stainbrook?
Yes.
Bernie Garitas?
I have a question relative to the vote.
Yes, Mr.
So my question is, since we're basically truncating this petition after the petitioners said that they're interested in looking at the MR after, from their words, just realizing over the last probably 10 to 14 days that this was going to be a recommendation from the staff. I found very helpful, frankly. Thank you very much, staff. I really did. Will they have an opportunity to change the petition at the commissioner stage to an MR petition, or does our vote tonight finalize it for the HR and they'll have to resubmit an MR petition and start through the process all over again?
The vote basically sends a negative recommendation to the commissioners. Immediately, the proposed zoning map would be certified to the commissioners. They in turn would hold a public hearing.
Sorry, Larry, I accidentally muted you. I was trying to mute, sorry.
Okay, let me start over there. Basically, the vote sends the petition to the commissioners with a negative recommendation. The commissioners can either approve it as submitted, deny it as submitted, or send it back to the Plan Commission as amended for additional hearing. However, they cannot vote without sending it back to the Plan Commission to rezone it anything in any way that deviates from the petition that's being certified. Any deviation would have to go back to the Plan Commission for additional hearings.
Understood.
Okay, does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate you and Dave both explaining those.
But let me say something, Larry. There is one case, City of Crown Point, where in front of the county, the town council a petitioner amended their application, and the court said they could do that. So, you know, I guess that's something that counsel for the petitioner can look at. The City of Crown Point versus Misty Woods property, 864 Northeast 2nd, 1069 at page 1080. And they can raise that with commissioners if they think that that applies.
Point of information.
I'm just really sorry. I would just like to...
Point of order, Madam Chairperson, this is ridiculous. Now the county council's advising counsel for the petitioner. We're voting, let's vote, or just close the meeting and go home.
I agree. So Mr. Wilson, would you please continue calling the roll?
I'll continue the roll. The current vote so far is Jeff McKim, no. Jim Steenbrook, yes. Bernie Garitas?
No.
Margaret Clemens?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Amy Thompson?
No.
Tryon Ray Randolph?
I'm not going to use my time to make a comment. No.
Okay. Jerry Pittsford's still not in attendance, am I correct?
Correct.
Dee Owens?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion fails 4-4.
Yeah, we require a majority for any motion. So in the lack of 5 members voting either for or against, the motion fails.
So what was
I'd like to make a motion to move this to our next regular meeting for the final hearing.
I don't think
We don't need a motion for that.
Oh, okay. Well.
Second.
We don't need a motion. It automatically moves to the second.
I know I made a second. I didn't make a motion, Jeff.
Sorry. Sorry, Bernie.
Jesus, thank you.
We're getting punchy.
Okay, so if there's no other motions made, then we will go ahead and hear this at the July Plan Commission meeting, and the regular meeting will be on July 20th at 5:30 p.m.
And I would like to assert that should the residential zoning change from a PUD to an MR, that it's a completely different petition, and that the petition needs to be advertised and the public needs to be informed. And right now the zoning is RE1. A proposal for PUD is on the table, and we are not going to confound it by hearing about MR.
So, no. It's
that's not correct.
High density residential.
Yeah.
PUD's off the table.
Okay, high density. Yeah. Okay, so so if there's an amendment between now and then, public notice has to be given, and we have to do our due diligence to inform the community. And I'm really disappointed in our Plan Commission, in our function tonight. I have to say that as president of the Plan Commission, I feel that I feel disrespected. I have to say that, and I really don't appreciate that. So let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the final item on the agenda tonight, and it is for REZ-2. It's ORD 005-32. Heritage Creek PUD extension request, and this is the preliminary hearing with the waiver of final hearing requested.
Okay. So this is a request for Heritage Creek Plan Unit Development to extend their PUD zoning allowance to allow for an amended petition for this site. So the location of this site is at the 9300 block of South Harrodsburg Road. It consists of 2 parcels totaling around acres, section 29 of Clear Creek Township. And the owner is Miller Robertson, Inc. And as I mentioned, the zoning is currently planned unit development. So we are reviewing this in relation to Chapter 811, which allows for the Plan Commission to extend the time or to initiate action to amend a zoning map as to rescind the plan unit development designation. So just to give you a little bit of background here, the petition site was originally rezoned to plan unit development in 2001, and that allowance under that ordinance was for 10 duplexes, 1 bedroom and 1 story. There was a development plan approved in 2001, but never completed. And then in 2005, the plan unit development was amended to allow for 9 fourplexes on 1 lot. So the 2005, they submitted again a development plan, which was not completed. So fast forward to today, and we've been contacted for a request to locate duplexes on the site, and that utilities are partially installed. Before a petitioner or owner proceeds with an outline plan amendment to potentially change for their requested development, we are reviewing this in relation to Chapter 811 to see that the Plan Commission would still like this plan unit development to proceed.
Okay, I'd like the 2 participants who've raised their hands for them to be lowered, because we're not here at a time for discussion.
Okay. Yeah, tech services, if you could lower the hand raise for now. Yeah, so the location map is in the Clear Creek Township, and it's located near the intersection of Popcorn and Harrodsburg. The slope of this area is relatively flat, although you'll see that there's a partially constructed road through the northern parcel, and then a drainage easement that runs through the property, and some downward slope towards a detention pond that's been partially constructed as well. So the comprehensive plan has this whole area as designated community for the Harrodsburg area. And the current zoning of the area includes plan unit development. There is a plan unit development to the north, though it's more closely related to light industrial. So this light blue color is similar uses. There's also suburban residential, urban residential, low density residential, and agricultural rural reserve. So you have several different uses in the area, some residential, some institutional, industrial, business, a lot of different uses. So they have had the property surveyed in the past, and just note, as it exists today, there's a 50-foot drainage easement that runs through the property. There's existing sanitary sewer. And by the request of the Planning Commission from the last meeting, that the petitioner's representative, Mr. Butler, has put together an as-built of the site, which I have side by side with their 2005 approved development plan. And I'll just kind of walk through a couple of the important points. So where my cursor is right now is the storm infrastructure. And then you also have the sanitary infrastructure as well. So you can see that a lot of the storm infrastructure has been installed. There has been some installation of the sanitary. The road is still listed as gravel, and there is note of retention pond with some connectivity there, but it's not all the way built out as it was intended even in 2005. So this wouldn't meet today's standards for a development. So just an aerial photo of the site today. Again, partial installation of the infrastructure on this site. And then the petitioner's representative is asking for an extension of the plan unit development. And though they don't want to build fourplexes, what you're considering tonight is an extension of the latest amendment of the PUD, which would accommodate fourplexes. They would, however, be more interested in duplexes. So staff gives a recommendation of denial to extend the ordinance 2005-32, which allows for the 9 fourplexes. And we're also looking for approval to request the waiver of final hearing. Now, let me kind of explain and walk through some of the, I guess, next steps if denied or approved. So if it's denied to extend the request for plan unit development, the Plan Commission could do one of two things: initiate a rezone of the property to follow the comprehensive plan for the area. Alternatively, signal that you're not interested in the ordinance extension for the fourplexes, but you could allow the petitioner to apply for a new outline plan amendment showing duplexes instead of the fourplexes, and not immediately initiate a rezone of the site. Alternatively, if approved, the petitioner could proceed with proposing a development plan for staff that meets the current ordinance, or file an outline plan amendment to amend the latest approved PUD zoning. So I wanted to walk through that, just a quick presentation. Does anyone have any questions for the Plan Commission at this point? Or for staff, sorry.
So, so Julie, Commissioner Thomas.
Yeah, sorry. So I have a question for Ms. Thatonia about this, because I'm curious about the drainage situation on this property, and whether what's been installed is going to be a problem, because it's been partially completed. Is that going to lead to more problems because it's only partially done? Because so my concern is that if we deny for whatever reason or rezone, or that remains on the property, and I don't know if that has to be addressed or if there needs to be some remediation.
Hi, Julie. Yeah, I can speak to them like during when we're reviewing plans to get a current condition of the infrastructure. I think it would be definitely a good idea to do that beforehand rather than go into the as-built phase when everything is built out and find that the pipes were damaged. I think that is a really great idea and a great point. We do have a new stormwater inspector as well, who we have available to also get eyes on the infrastructure. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Now, Jackie, are you finished presenting everything you wanted to present? Okay, so are there any other questions from members of the Plan Commission for staff? And if there are none, we will go to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative to hear from them.
I believe that is Daniel. So, yeah.
And Mr. Butler.
Hello, everybody. I'll just give a quick introduction here, but tonight with me I have Steve Robertson and Dennis Miller. We provided a map that we did a survey on a couple weeks ago. So this is current. This is a current as-built survey of what is actually out there. Julie's correct that when we would go to do the work on the rest of the site, we would, be making sure that the pond was to its status that it was designed for, and that is what the as-built survey helps us with. So no doubt there'll have to be some a little bit of extra, probably scooping out of sediment and things that have probably accumulated throughout the site. So no, we couldn't just leave it as is, but just to give you an idea, we've approximated the current improvements that are out there now toward the current plan at about $150,000 worth of improvements that went towards the plan that was approved in 2005. I'll leave it at that. That's kind of an introduction. I don't believe we mind which vehicle that you'd like to take this with, if it is the original PUD or if you want to rezone it under a certain zone. But we'd like to do the plan that was approved in 2005, and that's what we're going towards. So whatever is most comfortable with the Plan Commission is fine with us. But I'll give it to Dennis and Steve, and I think they'll give you just a little more background on the project, if you don't mind, real fast.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Butler.
Texter, go to Steve Robertson to speak.
Steve Robertson or Dennis Miller?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi, good late evening, everyone. This is Dennis Miller, and I'm here with my friend Steve. Steve and I grew up around Harrodsburg. We've lived around the community all our lives, and when the Harrodsburg Rural Community Growth Policies Plan went in place, and we found that at that time to add a few homes to the town, and we worked hard with the staff at that time. The community did, and several meetings with planning staff at the Harrodsburg Community Center, and they targeted different zoning in the business core area of Harrodsburg, and it's in a unique setting out of the lake watershed, and it was time with sewer grants that went in place, which was approved, and adequate water infrastructure. So we decided to build a small amount of housing in the neighborhood, and that was our goal. We aren't builders or developers. We just had a goal, and I would like to say that the retention pond is built to the standards designed by Bynum Fanyo during that time period for the runoff of the 9 rooftops, whether they were fourplexes and now the top floor removed to duplexes, which is half the density. So the retention was built at their design and complete, and it's all completed with the overflow in the center and the spillway as well into a tributary, and that was all calculated as water runoff from the tributary that meandered down through Old Highway 37 to Clear Creek, which was all out of the lake watershed. So that was all put in place. And then there is to the north part of the property where the 4-inch or where the water main connects, which is in place. The water infrastructure is in place as well, the city water. To the north, can everyone see the very north tip where there you go, Daniel, up a little higher, please. To the right. Yeah, to the left. To the north of our entrance to the project of Heritage Creek, there's a property there that was zoned along West Popcorn Road. It was zoned PUD at the same time the Harrodsburg, there it is, the Harrodsburg Rural Communities Growth Policies Plan was in place. So on the west side of that property along the fence line, I owned the property at the time, and I sold the property that next spring with an easement and a right-of-way for a sidewalk to be connected all the way to Popcorn Road to meander up to walk up to the community center. So that is in place, and there's 200 lineal feet of sidewalk in place on the west side of that PUD property to the north. So the sidewalks in our current, in our Heritage Creek proposal will connect to that existing sidewalk that's in place. And I just wanted to mention that everyone would recognize that that's already built out as well.
Okay, are there any other comments from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative?
Yes, ma'am, this is Dennis again, Madam President. I forgot to mention Duke Energy and Smithville Fiber. Those are in place with 2 transformers, 400 lineal feet into property. And then there's another extension of Duke Energy, another 200 lineal feet. So Duke Energy and fiber optic is in the project close, nearly 600 lineal feet from Harrodsburg Road into the back of the property.
And all the sanitary is in place.
All the sanitary sewer is in place. All of the laterals are sticking up at each building site.
Mm-hmm.
The entrance road, there was a storm grate there and storm sewer put in. Yes, it's all in place as well. So it was all designed by Bine and Faneuil with the tributary and the runoff from the retention for the rooftops at the time again. So we had a goal for additional housing in Harrodsburg, and we request your best consideration. We're flexible either way.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Now, do any members of the Plan Commission have questions for the petitioner or the petitioner's representative? Kim, and then Mr. Garatas.
Yes, Mr. Butler, did I hear you say that you did have a path forward with a rezone rather than an extension of the PUD?
Yeah, our understanding is that we could do this several different ways. I mean, even if it was something like, what we're talking on the previous case, if it was something as simple as even like an HR, you could actually subdivide this property, or you could do some other kind of multifamily housing type zoning that would work out for this plan as is. So I believe that we have some options here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garatas?
Thanks, Margaret. Question for the petitioner. So the revised, the renewed, or the PUD amendment for the 9 quadplexes, that came about in 2005, and you got the approvals, you got the development. What halted it? And I know you said that you're not developers, and I understand that. I really do. But 2005, it was probably maybe 2000, pushing into 2006, and maybe when you kind of got all the paperwork and everything finalized for the development plan. What caused the halt on, because you put a bunch of work in the property. I mean, you physically transformed, you put in the utilities based on the 9-plex, all the sewer, the water, the electric, the fiber, the storm sewer, other than some erosion control maintenance. What caused the slow up all of a sudden?
Okay, Bernie, I will answer.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear Bernie? Or can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
To answer the question, mostly it took, by the time our permits were all approved in February of 2006, it took maybe 2 years of construction to get the infrastructure into that point. Then if everybody recalls the economic downturn, the financial cliff collapsed at the time for 10 years, housing at a standstill. We floated through that time, and we maintained the property, it's well kept. We thought that since the Rural Communities Growth Policies Plan was in place for Harrodsburg, that with the current amount of infrastructure in place, we thought we were in order with the zoning ordinances because we thought we had our 95% infrastructure in place. That's the second reason for us not developing it out at the time. Now, if we didn't know it had expired, so if the Harrodsburg Rural Communities Plan question, is it still in place? Has that been changed? If it has been changed, we didn't know, that it had been. So, we had been on committees and knew that was there for growth around Harrodsburg for a 2-mile radius of proposed growth with infrastructure supporting the town proper. So we didn't move forward because we thought it was in place. Now, what we could have done is built one building. Would one building permit suffice that we started the unit or started the development? Is that it, to obtain a building permit?
So Steve, just to answer your question about the PUD being expired, that's what's under consideration for the Plan Commission at this time. So your PUD is not currently expired, it is active. However, there hasn't been any substantial development. No, you've partially installed the infrastructure to date. But at this point, the Plan Commission is considering whether to extend the latest version of the PUD amendment, which is to allow for fourplexes. And then your question about the Harrodsburg Rural Community Plan, that has not been expired, and that's still under, that's filed in the planning office. We have, since there's been a substantial time period, updated comprehensive plans and subsequent plans since that time. So it still exists. However, there may be amendments to that at what we know now under our comprehensive plans for the areas.
Okay, so may I ask the question, were we to obtain a building permit, what would that have done?
I think you're asking around the question of vesting. So you have installed some level of infrastructure, but it's been significant time period since you've pulled any permits. And so, yeah, if you would have built out this development in 2005 or even 2001 and even partially developed it, it wouldn't be, under our consideration. We would not be able to easily bring it before review. Given that, but if Larry or Dave wants to add to that, there's a lot of nuances to being vested, but a lot of this has to do with the time period that's passed since initial infrastructure was installed and that no activity has happened since then.
I understand. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the petitioner from members of the Plan Commission? If there are none, I'd like to go to the public and see if there's any member of the public who would like to speak who is opposed to this petition or in favor of this petition. Sorry. Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Seeing none, I can bring it back to the members of the Plan Commission for further discussion and then a possible motion. Mr. McKim.
Yes, this is a question for staff. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more if this were to proceed instead as a rezone. What would staff's recommendation be and what would the path forward be? I mean, I think we all want to implement at least I hope we want to implement the comprehensive plan to the degree that we can.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jeff. And I'll also note that in hearing from Daniel and Steve and Dennis, I think there might be a little bit of a disconnect in understanding that they had requested a pre-design for 9 duplexes. And I'm not 100% sure we could get there with another rezone, though I'm open to Daniel showing us a plan for that. So this is a discussion really about extending the fourplexes, but also a discussion about bringing forward an amendment even to allow for the duplexes, which was originally permitted in 01. But to go back to Jeff's question about what kind of zoning would staff support in this area, I'm just going to pull up again the zoning map and comprehensive plan for this area. So give me just a second. So as you can see, kind of surrounding this area, you actually have a lot of different densities permitted. So urban residential is similar to high density residential. And then you also have medium density residential and low density residential. So staff in this area, I mean, with the allowance of sewer and proximity here, you do have suburban residential here. What we're looking for, I would say, in the comprehensive plan and moving forward is some sort of maybe medium or even high density if it would allow it. But we're trying to move towards, in the CDO zoning map when that is released, really honing in on the designated community area. In the comprehensive plan, it is quite large. And so we really want to look at like that walkability context in that block development. So the medium density residential and the high density residential would allow for the single family attached home. But this other lot to the south is bisected by that drainage easement that's 50 feet wide. And they're also planning for a detention basin here. So it kind of makes this other portion of their acreage not really accessible. So we're really looking at this portion up here. So it would have to have fresh eyes and meet today's standards. So that may not have been, you know, consideration in 2005. We didn't have the slope requirements and other requirements that might be into play. So does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes, and then just as a matter of process, so this is the first hearing, so that we are under no obligation to take a vote tonight. There's additional time for the petitioner and staff to kind of work together and come up with something that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We want to make sure that the petitioner is very clear on what is being voted on and what the alternatives are. So, you know, to the extent that they may believe that the duplexes of 9 duplexes could be permitted under a by right zoning, I would like more time to discuss with them and look into that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Garatas?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, Margaret, go ahead.
I just was giving the order. I'll recognize you and then Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Jeff brought up a good comment, realizing that this is the first hearing. I'm not one to kick things down the road, but I think the petitioner's understanding what the options are out there, I think is very important, and staff may shed some light. I indicated before, Jim mentioned that he was familiar with the Robertsons or the Millers, and I am too, not on a professional basis necessarily, but just because I did work down at the sewer, on the sewer project back in 1996, I think. Anyway, and the improvements and the things that these families have done regularly and consistently for that community are huge. And I don't see, you know, if I look at the high density residential, and if you just do thumbnail math on how many units that would be based on the density table, it's pretty close to 34, 36 units on that property. I'm compelled, and I'll stop because I think we will probably hear this again, but I'm compelled because I do think that there's been a substantial amount of due diligence for the 9 quadplex plan that was approved in 2005 that we're talking about this evening. And I think that the Harrodsburg community is a community where in 2005, this format seemed to be useful and plausible. And I think it would still be that way now. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for letting me kind of ramble there, but I think it's a good plan.
Thank you, Mr. Garatas. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I think something that you raised before, Ms. Clements, has led me to ask this question of legal, whether it be Mr. Schilling or Mr. Wilson. When you have a petitioner that is willing to modify, amend a petition based on the initial comments in a preliminary hearing, how do we ensure that the public is notified of that new revised plan? Is there a re-advertisement? Is there another letter that goes out? Or is it really just, hey, something's going on this property, you need to pay attention?
I think the answer is either whether we did a zoning map amendment to one of our traditional zones or a zoning map amendment to our basic outline plan amendment to change the terms of the PUD. Either one of those are ordinances that require public hearings and public notice. So it'd be no different than any other petition we have for rezoning. So there will be public notice. There will be notice to neighbors as well.
So, and just to add on that, because Julie's hitting on the point that this is a request tonight to extend the latest amendment of the PUD, which allows for fourplexes, but the petitioner and their representative are thinking that they might want to construct duplexes. So what we have as an alternative is that you could signal that you don't want to extend the fourplexes, but give time allowance for the petitioner to submit an outline plan amendment for the duplexes, and it would go through the normal planning procedure for any outline plan amendment. But that's, I think, your question. Okay.
Yeah, I would just add one thing, that although case law suggests that a petitioner can amend their application, the planning board or commission is not required to accept that amendment. It's up to the planning commission as to whether they would accept that. So
are you finished, Mr. Schilling?
Yep.
Mr. Garatas?
Okay, so maybe the potential would be if this was gone ahead and moved to not moved, but allowed to process to the next meeting, the second hearing. And then in the meantime, staff and the petitioner's representative got together and discussed what the actual options are to make sure there was good connectivity between the thought processes. Then they could always withdraw this petition and go ahead and start developing a plan for a rezone or another PUD or some other site development layout that they could bring back to us, because that would have to happen anyway. So having this go to the next meeting just gives the flexibility of time that they don't lose a vested petition, but they can always withdraw it and go ahead and start moving on another type of petition after they talk to staff and discuss it a little bit. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, so Bernie, this is kind of a collaborative effort in noting that the petitioner doesn't want to do the fourplexes, and also that staff and plan commission has the ability under the zoning ordinance to review plan unit developments from time to time and consider whether they should be time for expiration. So the plan commission and staff could still proceed with reviewing whether this outline plan should be extended, regardless of whether the petitioner agrees.
Well, there's a lot on the table to consider about how to best strategically go forward. And are there other questions, procedural or otherwise, that any member of the Plan Commission has for staff or for the petitioner? If there are none, I think then if there's no motion, then the only motion that could remain is the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, have a good night, everyone. Thanks so much for good work.